Chapter 1581. You're still able to fight? Su Xiaolan was given a fright, and she turned to stare at the man in the coffin with her beautiful eyes. Have you been beaten senseless? She asked suspiciously. Do you have some mental issues? In Enlin's current condition, any return to void stage mighty figure would be able to pummel him into the ground. Even so, he was still trying to join a battle between heavenly gods? Wasn't that just asking for death? Calm down, Enlin. The battle is currently in our favor. If you enter the fray in your current state, it could backfire on us. Let's assess the situation first, all right? Su Xiaolan was afraid that Enlin would still not be able to accept this, so she explained in a gentle and patient voice. Enlin finally calmed down a little upon hearing Su Xiaolan's gentle and concerned words. He thought about it for a moment, and even though this mission was very important, he only had one life, so he couldn't be too cautious. As such, he decided to rest in the coffin for a while longer. The battle on the battlefield was still extremely intense, and devastating spell techniques were being unleashed one after another. Heavenly God Jordan and the Heavenly Metal God seemed to have been stimulated by the Heavenly Mountain God's death, and their attacks became even more ferocious. They were already willing to exchange lives for lives without any hesitation. They knew that if they didn't give it their all now, they wouldn't have another chance. The Heavenly Earth God wouldn't save them. The Heavenly Mountain God's death was the best proof of that. They had to rely on themselves. Heavenly God Jordan felt like he wouldn't be able to defeat the heaven-crushing celestial Dharch. He looked at the Heavenly Metal God, who was engaged in a bitter battle, as well as the Heavenly Earth God, and finally made a decision. Boom! A violent collision ensued. The terrifying heaven-crushing true intent blasted Heavenly God Jordan into the ground. The celestial Dharch stood proudly at the pinnacle of the heavens, and his eyes reflected heaven and earth, as if he were the embodiment of heaven and earth. However, his hands were imbued with the terrifying power to destroy heaven and earth. Such a contradictory being was the one and only monarch on this battlefield. Heavenly God Jordan looked up at the figure, and he suddenly burst into laughter. Ha ha! So what if you've mastered a heaven-crushing technique? He stood up from the sunken ground and looked at the celestial Dharch with a cold smile. Our heavenly human tribe is a tribe that serves the heavens. I will make you understand that all those who defy the heavens must die. Boom! An inky black divine halo appeared above Heavenly God Jordan's head. Dark divine light was released as if it wanted to devour everything in the world. The pure golden pupils became deep and gloomy. The 8 divine halos of different attributes were drawn away from his body by the divine halo above his head. They entered the black hole-like divine halo above his head and disappeared. Bursts of black light engulfed heaven and earth, making Heavenly God Jordan appear as if he were a fiend celestial. The celestial Thearcha's eyes narrowed slightly. Black divine halo, the fall of a heavenly god. Is Heavenly God Jordan finally going to give it his all? It could be said that this was the true power of the divine heaven stage, heavenly human tribe. However, the price they had to pay was extremely heavy. They would not be able to withstand this power and would be killed by the backlash of the heavenly Tao, just like Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu. The celestial Thearcha's hands were as dazzling as the stars in the sky, and he thrust both palms toward Heavenly God Jordan. Heaven-crushing meteorite palm. Bright blue stars tore through the night sky, and their extremely pure starlight instantly outshone all of the other stars in the sky. The celestial Dharch was not going to give his opponent a chance to catch a breather. He was not going to stall for time and wait for his opponent to die of exhaustion. He had attained heaven-crushing true intent, so he was only going to beat his opponent into submission. Heavenly God Jordan was clearly not expecting the celestial Dharch to take the initiative. A faint ripple appeared in his lifeless eyes before he spoke in a cold voice, "You're courting death." A black divine halo enshrouded his entire body, and he unleashed a palm toward the heavens. The power of his palm exploded to form a massive dark golden palm. Not only was the power of metal imbued with boundless power, but it was also imbued with the power of the dark divine halo. Bam! The celestial Thearcha's heaven-crushing meteorite palm clashed with heavenly god Jordan's attack, and energy exploded violently. From a distance, it looked as if two extremely dazzling stars had crashed into the golden palm. The two bursts of energy clashed in a frenzy. The dark golden palm continued to crack open, but the power of destruction became even more exuberant, completely engulfing the light of the stars. In the end, the remnants of the golden palm crashed into the celestial Thearcha's palm, and the celestial Tharch was blasted flying with blood gushing from his mouth. This was the first time he had been blasted flying in such a disheveled manner ever since his battle with heavenly god Jordan. Black Spirit Snake and White Spirit Snake didn't give heavenly god Jordan any time to catch his breath. They slashed their divine swords through the air, unleashing one earth-shattering sword projection after another. Heavenly god Jordan then unleashed a few casual palms to vanquish their attacks, and the shock waves from his palms even sent them flying with blood gushing from their mouths. Only now did they truly understand just how difficult it was for Enlil to battle heavenly goddess Linyu, who had a 9th-level divine halo. How could a heavenly god be weak when he used his life to cheat? Su Xiaolan was getting quite anxious for the celestial Thearchs, and she wanted to rush over to help them. However, the phoenix and the 9-colored divine vermilion bird were even faster than her. These two were the most regal and beautiful mythological beasts on the entire Tai Chu continent, and they actually didn't see eye to eye with one another when they first met. However, they couldn't help but join forces to attack one another. The 9-colored divine vermilion bird spread her wings to the extreme, and her power of the divine Tao instantly permeated the entire sky. 9 streaks of light with different attributes of the divine Tao intertwined to form a destructive tornado that hurtled toward heavenly god Jordan. Heavenly god Jordan remained expressionless, and he couldn't even be bothered to look at the incoming attack. He merely extended a palm, and an indestructible divine power shield materialized to keep the 9-colored divine vermilion bird's attack at bay. At this moment, the phoenix's heaven-crushing nirvana flames crashed down from the heavens before crashing into heavenly god Jordan's shield. The two attacks of the divine Tao finally managed to crack open his shield. Heavenly god Jordan's brows furrowed slightly. He had to find an opportunity to take care of them all at once. It was also at this moment. An extremely sharp screech suddenly erupted in the distance. This was a sound that was 10,000 times more piercing than the sound of fingernails scraping against a blackboard. Enlil was situated within the coffin, and he immediately used a spell technique to seal his ears. Su Xiaolan and Enlil both turned toward the heavenly metal god. The heavenly metal god had already summoned a silvery white liquid metal to shield herself. The ancient dragon empress had already transformed into a red and black true dragon, and her terrifying dragon might swept forth like a tsunami. Her extremely sharp claws dug viciously into the silvery white metal before slowly tearing at it. The piercing screech was coming from none other than this tearing. Enlin's eyes lit up with excitement. Hurry! Xiaolan! The ancient dragon empress and the heavenly metal god are locked in a stalemate, so this is a good opportunity. Let's go get the heavenly metal god. Chapter 1582. Su Xiaolan had initially wanted to retort to Enlil. However, her heart softened at the sight of the ancient dragon empress and the heavenly metal god's determined expression as well as Enlin's yearning and determined expression. She still had some power left over to protect Enlil. How about she accompany Enlil for a while longer? Su Xiaolan knew that Enlil wouldn't do meaningless things. If he said he had a way to deal with the heavenly metal god, then he definitely had a way. Perhaps this was the blind confidence Su Xiaolan had in Enlil after experiencing so many things. Su Xiaolan spread open her white holy flame wings and rose into the air, leaving a silvery white streak of light in her wake as she flew toward the battlefield in the distance. The night wind blew past her intricate features, and her hair billowed like ink behind her. Her eyes reflected the moonlight, as if there were balls of holy flames within them. Su Xiaolan flew through the air at an extremely fast speed, and she soon arrived at the heavenly metal god's battlefield. Her dragon sparrow sword was abruptly unsheathed, and a burst of fiery lightning exploded forth. Heaven-crushing vermilion bird strike. An extremely vast aura erupted from her body, and she was like a vermilion bird soaring through the air. Her dragon sparrow sword was imbued with extremely powerful heaven-crushing true intent as well as the essential power of the vermilion bird, and it struck the heavenly metal god's silvery white shield. Screech! An extremely sharp screeching sound erupted once again. The silvery white liquid metal was sliced open by the blade of the sword, and the area where the blade of the sword came into contact with the shield was boiling from the extreme temperatures. The heavenly metal god was already on par with the ancient dragon empress, and now that a super mighty figure who was extremely adept in heaven-crushing techniques had joined the fray, the tables were instantly turned. Divine Phoenix Maiden. The heavenly metal god spat out Su Xiaolan's Dao title through gritted teeth. Her face was filled with hatred and rage, and she was clearly extremely displeased with her interference. The ancient dragon empress was elated. She wasn't a pushover, and she didn't believe in one-on-one battles. She had been fighting alone for so long. Finally, she had a teammate to help her. She was very happy, even if this teammate had been an enemy 100 years ago. Never would they have thought that 100 years later, they would be joining forces against a heavenly god who wielded paramount power. The silvery white liquid released by the heavenly metal god was slowly approaching the brink of collapse. At this moment, her blood-red eyes suddenly released a blood-red light that hit the silver-white liquid metal. Her tone was as indifferent as a heavenly decree. Inject star level 0-degree radiation disintegration metal. The silvery white liquid metal suddenly transformed into a wriggling crimson alloy upon being injected by the crimson light. At the same time, an invisible radiation was released from the alloy before instantly enshrouding Su Xiaolan and the ancient dragon empress bodies. In that instant, both Su Xiaolan and the ancient dragon empress felt as if their bodies were undergoing a transformation. From the cellular level to the molecular level, the activity had dropped to the absolute freezing point, as if all activity had been lost. If it weren't for the fact that both of them had cultivated heaven-crushing techniques to protect themselves, their bodies would have been destroyed or even disintegrated by this radiation. The crimson alloy converged into a ball before flying towards Su Xiaolan and the ancient dragon empress. The ball was extremely sinister under the night sky, and the red radiation emanating from it was boundless. Su Xiaolan and the ancient dragon empress movements became extremely sluggish in that instant, as if they were diverting all of their power to resist the radiation. Gotcha! A crack suddenly appeared on the heavenly metal god's divine halo, and her aura quickly began to wane. However, she was not panicked or enraged, as if she had already anticipated this. A cruel smile appeared on her face as she charged towards Su Xiaolan and the ancient dragon empress, who had been temporarily repressed by the radiation, with the twisted crimson metal ball in her hand. The heavenly metal god had already prepared herself for a situation where she would not be able to escape unscathed from the moment Su Xiaolan joined the battle. She had unleashed her power that was guaranteed to be severely wounded by the backlash of the heavenly Tao in order to insta-kill the two of them. Sacrificing 800 soldiers to kill 2,000 enemies was a very worthwhile price. However, just as the heavenly metal god was rapidly approaching the two of them, the lid of the coffin behind Su Xiaolan suddenly flew off, and a white-robed figure appeared before her. An Lin flew through the air, and the earthy divine halo above his head glowed with a scintillating light. A suit of gray armor appeared over his entire body, exuding an eternal aura that kept all radiation at bay. This was the power of mountains that he had obtained from the heavenly mountain god, and it was still quite fresh. A paramount and boundless aura crashed down like a gargantuan mountain countless of millions of feet tall, making the heavenly metal god's aura falter slightly. It was quite clear that her aura was no match for the power of mountains. Unlin's features were deathly pale as he looked at the heavenly metal god. He was clearly forcing himself to use the power of mountains. The heavenly metal god was initially taken aback by Unlin's sudden appearance before an elated expression appeared on her face. "Unlin, you think you can defeat me in your current state? If you want to die, then I'll just have to kill you first. You're not in much better shape yourself." Unlin could see that the heavenly metal god was already extremely feeble, so this was the perfect opportunity to strike. The heavenly metal god was already upon him. Unlin knew that he would not be able to defeat the heavenly metal god in his current state. Hence, he pulled out a mundane-looking stone. This was a special tool that Nuwa had bestowed upon him, the heavenly stone. The heavenly stone was imbued with Nuwa's chaotic power, and it could be tossed as a rock to inflict lethal damage on one's enemy. It could be used a total of 10 times. In the past, Unlin had used the heavenly stone to smash Emperor Bei Xing twice. He still had 8 uses left, and this was one of his trump cards. Now, he was going to use this trump card as a hack. That's right, Unlin had come here because he had his own plans. The heavenly stone was a rock. So what would happen if he were to infuse the power of the heavenly mountain god into this terrifying stone? Unlin was already frantically activating the power of the heavenly mountain god as he looked at the oncoming heavenly metal god. Victory or defeat would be decided here. Hardness maximized. The mundane-looking stone suddenly became smooth and sleek, and it also shrank to half its original size. Maximized quality. Crack, 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 space cracked open, and an inky black divine light suddenly erupted from the stone, as if it were going to engulf everything. However, a peculiar chaotic power was fusing harmoniously with the divine light emanating from the stone. In fact, the power of the stone had undergone a qualitative change, and this was a qualitative change that struck fear into Unlin's heart. Maximized power of mountains. Unlin let loose an enraged roar, and the light from the divine halo above his head converged upon the stone, making it as dazzling as metal. At the same time, it was imbued with the paramount power of laws that could crush all things. Go! The stone hurtled toward the heavenly metal god like a streak of golden light. The stone was only the size of a palm, but in that instant, the heavenly metal god felt as if she could see a massive divine mountain crashing down upon her with boundless might. Chapter 1583. The heavenly metal god had nowhere to run, and she immediately slashed her alloy blade projection toward the heavenly stone. Boom! The sound of metal and stone colliding erupted. The heavenly metal god felt as if she had struck an indestructible divine mountain over 1 billion feet tall, and the extremely terrifying force of the collision threatened to pulverize her entire body. The boundless and boundless weight pushed her backward continuously. But who was she? She was a heavenly god, the true heavens. No matter how big a mountain was, could it be as big as the heavens? No matter how tall a mountain was, could it be as tall as the heavens? The heavenly metal god let loose an enraged roar as paramount divine might erupted from her body. The power of her alloy blade projection soared once again, as if it had been forced into a corner. A crimson divine light clashed with a golden divine light in an extremely frenzied manner. It could be said that this was a clash between 2 powers of the heavenly god. However, there was something different about this clash. This was because the power of the heavenly stone and Nuwa's chaotic power were imbued within the heavenly stone. A burst of chaotic power imbued with absolute nothingness erupted from the heavenly stone. A clash between 2 powers of the heavenly gods would result in an unstoppable force if there was a slight imbalance. Crack! The heavenly metal god's alloy blade projection began to crack open at the spot where it clashed with the heavenly stone, and the cracks quickly began to spread. The heavenly stone shattered the heavenly metal god's alloy blade projection before crashing into the heavenly metal god's chest like a shooting star. Bam! Her peerlessly indestructible metal body suffered an unprecedented blow in that instant, as if it were going to pulverize her entire being. The heavenly metal god's eyes widened, and her entire body caved in. This small stone was imbued with unimaginable power that could pulverize her entire being. The heavenly metal god had never seen such a terrifying stone before. In her eyes, a metal saber could slice through stone, but there was no way a stone could shatter metal. What kind of stone was this? Was it a hack? The heavenly metal god's imagination had been completely shattered. The metallic stone was imbued with the power to destroy all things, and it caved in and twisted her body before puncturing it. The heavenly metal god had been able to keep her body deformed even in the face of the ancient dragon empress' most powerful heaven-crushing techniques, but her body had been punctured by a small stone. The heavenly metal god's body was sent flying like a cannonball before crashing into the ground, where she left a massive crater in the ground. Lin panted heavily as he recalled the heavenly stone. In the instant that the heavenly metal god's body was destroyed, the metal disintegrated into specks of light that disappeared into thin air. Su Xiaolan and the ancient dragon empress regained their mobility at the same time. Both of them were astonished to see Lin turn the tables on them. However, the ancient dragon empress was mostly astonished by Lin's strength and trump cards, while Su Xiaolan was astonished as if she were showing off, as if she were saying that her Dao partner was super powerful. Of course, they also knew that they couldn't just be shocked. The enemy had suffered heavy injuries, so what they should do now was naturally to beat the enemy when he was down. Genesis Vein, Sky-Piercing Vermilion Bird / Su Xiaolan spread open her holy flame wings, and her dragon sparrow sword, which was imbued with extremely powerful heaven-crushing true intent as well as the essential power of the vermilion bird, fell from the sky before striking the heavenly metal god's body. The scorching blade projection was imbued with heaven-crushing intent, and it tore another ghastly gash into her body. Su Xiaolan instantly realized that the heavenly metal god was extremely feeble at this moment. If she were at the height of her powers, there was no way that she would be able to break through the heavenly metal god's defenses so easily. The heavenly metal god was extremely enraged. She had put everything she had into this desperate battle, and if everything had gone according to plan, Su Xiaolan and the ancient dragon empress wouldn't have been able to do as they pleased. Who would have thought that Lin would suddenly jump out from his coffin? Her attack, which was supposed to be able to kill 2,000 enemies at the cost of 800 damage to herself and 1,000 damage to the enemy, the ancient dragon empress descended from the sky. Her arms had already transformed into dragon arms, and there were countless stars flashing between her dragon claws. There was even a faint galaxy of stars flowing within her palms. The starry sky was boundless, and it was exactly because of its vastness that it was possible to break through everything. The ancient dragon empress was like a goddess descending from the heavens. Heaven-crushing technique, heaven-shattering star. The heavenly metal god could feel boundless death engulfing her body. If this attack were to land, it was very likely that it would inflict lethal damage to her. The heavenly metal god activated her divine halo again, and a dazzling divine halo erupted from it. The super cyclone titanium alloy with the most powerful defensive properties and tenacity enshrouded her entire body, including her head. She had no choice but to activate her armor again. Otherwise, she would die in the next second. The ancient dragon empress heaven-shattering star finally landed. Boom! Boundless star energy erupted from the ground below. It was as if countless dazzling stars had suddenly erupted from a single point. They converged to form a galaxy of stars, which then exploded into a realm of stars, transforming the Earth into a vast expanse of blue and silvery white stars. Furthermore, it resonated with the starry sky in the sky, thereby triggering a second explosion. The Earth began to crumble and vanish. Countless stars exploded. Extremely powerful star power proliferated forth, annihilating and destroying all things. Enlin and Su Xiaolan, as well as Xianyuan Qing, Yi Ling, and Su Qianyun, all of whom were spectating from afar, had their eyes wide open as they marveled at this magnificent and powerful spell technique. Ding dong! Congratulations, host, you have obtained the heaven-shattering star technique. Imparting the true intent of the heaven-shattering star technique to you, all of a sudden, Enlin's mind was engulfed by a vast amount of information again. The amount of information and the power of the true intent made his head feel as if it were about to explode. Enlin gritted his teeth and endured as he absorbed everything within this spell technique. The system would automatically record all of the most powerful spell techniques of the heaven-crushing techniques and imparting them to him. What did this entail? After Chun Chun and the ancient Dragon Empress demonstration, he had finally attained all 9 of the most powerful heaven-crushing technique. First heaven-crushing technique, Finger of the Heavenly Tao. Second heaven-crushing technique, Foot of the Heavenly Tao. Third heaven-crushing technique, Fist of the Heavenly Tao. Fourth heaven-crushing technique, Palm of the Heavenly Tao. Fifth heaven-crushing technique, Heaven-shattering Star. Sixth heaven-crushing technique, Heavenly Tao Absolute Reincarnation. Seventh heaven-crushing technique, Palm of the Heavens. Eighth heaven-crushing technique, Dark Tao Disciple. Ninth heaven-crushing technique, Sword of the Heavenly Tao. So far, Enlin had only used the Finger of the Heavenly Tao. Chun Chun had told him that there was no difference in power between the heaven-crushing techniques and that any one of them would possess heaven-crushing power when cultivated to the extreme. However, there were differences in power and starting power after learning the spell technique. From the first to the 9th heaven-crushing technique, the 9th was the most powerful, and Lin had only used the Finger of the Heavenly Tao so far after suffering 2 self-detonations. Now then, can I use 1 or 2 other heaven-crushing techniques? Enlin began to stir with eagerness. Chapter 1584. The star energy dissipated. On the crater in a radius of several hundred kilometers, the super cyclone titanium alloy that the heavenly metal god had materialized had already shattered into pieces. Her neck was being clamped down by a sinister dragon claw, and it was getting tighter and tighter, as if it were trying to snap her neck. In front of her was a gorgeous and dignified woman who was staring at her with scarlet-red eyes. Her eyes were filled with boundless and surging killing intent that was like the depths of the sea. You killed Raphaela, so I'm going to sacrifice a heavenly god to her. The ancient dragon empress spoke in a cold voice as boundless heaven-crushing power erupted from her hands, destroying everything in the heavenly metal god's way. Ah! The heavenly metal god let loose a blood-curdling wail. Living beings would always unleash their terrifying latent potential when forced into dire straits, and the heavenly metal god was no exception. She relinquished all defenses and took the initiative to attack the ancient dragon empress. The heaven-crushing power instantly tore over 10,000 wounds into the heavenly metal god's body. The heavenly metal god's sleek, inky black body was riddled with countless cracks, giving her an extremely sinister appearance. The heavenly metal god's sharp divine tool hair suddenly stood up on end before elongating toward the ancient dragon empress at an extremely fast speed. It was as if countless extremely sharp divine swords were stabbing toward the ancient dragon empress at the same time, trying to puncture her with countless holes. The ancient dragon empress focused her gaze. Evil dragon thousand-turn wall. Countless little evil dragons wore true dragon-level armor and exuded a vast and terrifying aura as they revolved around the ancient dragon empress body, creating an impenetrable barrier. The sharp hair was imbued with paramount heavenly god laws, and it was able to pierce through all things, elevating its divine tool to a whole new level. One little evil dragon after another was punctured by the black hair. However, there was no end to the little evil dragons, and they were extremely mobile. After the old ones were punctured and pulverized, new little evil dragons would take their place. The heavenly metal god stabbed her hair in a frenzy, but she was unable to penetrate the ancient dragon empress body. "I'm going to kill you!" A sinister smile appeared on the heavenly metal god's face as a dazzling divine light erupted from the divine halo above her head again. A shiny golden metal plate suddenly appeared behind the ancient dragon empress, as if the heavenly metal god and the metal plate were sandwiching her from both sides. At this moment, a vicious expression appeared on the heavenly metal god's face, and a cruel smile appeared on her face. "Die. Primordial electrons, infinite pressure." A black divine light erupted from her body and the metal plate behind the ancient dragon empress at the same time. Purplish golden lightning surged toward the ancient dragon empress at the same time. Rumble! An earth-shattering sound of thunder erupted. Terrifying arcs of electricity pierced through the void, annihilating all things. The energy was gold on top and purple on the bottom. There was a faint grand mist force surging all around. This was the most primitive power, purple and ethereal, startling the night sky. The ancient dragon empress Little Evil Dragon was reduced to dust by the lightning. Little Evil Dragon Wall quickly replenished itself, but it was nowhere near as fast as the lightning. "Die, ancient dragon empress!" The heavenly metal god chortled with glee as she raised the power of her primordial electrons to their maximal limit. The purplish-golden electric arcs seemed to have transcended beyond the physical level and were progressing toward an even more terrifying direction. The ancient dragon empress gritted her teeth and held on with all her might. However, she knew that she really wouldn't be able to withstand this attack, and her body was about to be torn apart by this terrifying electric current. Right at this moment, the purplish-golden electric current suddenly froze on the spot, as if it were a still painting. The heavenly metal god faltered slightly upon seeing this. The purplish-golden electric current then suddenly changed directions before crashing down upon the heavenly metal god with even more terrifying power. Rumble! The heavenly metal god's body was torn apart in a frenzy by the bolts of lightning imbued with primordial power. She wasn't afraid of electricity as she was a conductor of electricity, but the power imbued within the electric current was destroying her body in an unbridled manner. "Who gave you the confidence to use electricity against me?" The super heavenly lightning god. A white-robed man looked down from above at the heavenly metal god with a peerless aura and majesty radiating from his body. The heavenly metal god suddenly came to a sudden realization. She had forgotten that Enlin possessed the power of the heavenly lightning god. She almost threw up a mouthful of blood with this in mind. Enlin again? Why was Enlin ruining her plans again? The heavenly metal god immediately cancelled her spell technique. Otherwise, she would be using her own spell technique to help her enemy attack her. In the end, she would be severely wounded again. At this moment, a woman in a jade dress charged toward her from behind, and her dragon sparrow sword whistled through the air. The heavenly metal god turned around and slapped a palm onto the blade of the sword, upon which sparks flew and an extremely sharp screeching sound erupted. The ancient dragon empress immediately pounced toward the heavenly metal god with all her might. The heavenly metal god's hair began to move again, transforming into countless divine weapons that pierced toward the ancient dragon empress. The ancient dragon empress unleashed a large number of small black evil dragons again to keep the heavenly metal god's ferocious attacks at bay. The heavenly metal god was already at the end of her tether. Her entire body was riddled with wounds, and her aura was also extremely feeble. This was the final straw that would crush her. A speck of golden light fell from the sky. Hardness maximized, mass maximized, and the power of mountains maximized. Enlin unleashed his power of mountains again without any reservation. The heavenly metal god felt as if there was a gargantuan divine mountain with no end in sight, crashing down from the sky with boundless might. She raised her head with great difficulty, and an expression of despair appeared in her eyes. The small golden stone smashed into the top of her head. Bam! Heaven and earth instantly fell silent. The golden rock crashed into the heavenly metal god's head, sending massive shockwaves surging through the air. Everyone could see that the golden rock had caved in the inky black metal, and it was as if an unstoppable force had converged upon it. The earth caved in again from the shockwaves of the collision. The top of the heavenly metal god's head also caved in, and it was only getting deeper and deeper. Her blood-curdling cries reverberated through the air. A sharp crack suddenly erupted, as if something had been broken. The golden heavenly rock tore through the heavenly metal god's head, piercing through her neck, her chest, her abdomen, and finally her lower body before crashing into the ground below. Regardless of whether it was Su Xiaolan, the ancient dragon empress, or Xianyuan Cheng and the others, all of them were dumbstruck upon seeing this. Even the culprit Enlin couldn't help but draw a sharp intake of breath upon seeing the scenes unfolding before his eyes. He had envisioned using the heavenly rock to cave in or even flatten the heavenly metal god's head. However, never would he have thought that he would be able to penetrate the heavenly metal god's entire body. There was a massive hole in the heavenly metal god's head, and she still raised her head with difficulty to look up at Enlin with indignation in her eyes. Never would she have thought that she, the most powerful metal in the heavenly metal god, would be smashed to death by a rock. The divine halo shattered violently before disintegrating into specks of light. Thump! The heavenly metal god's body stiffened before plummeting to the ground like a piece of scrap metal. Her inky black body also quickly evaporated like snow under the scorching sun. The once powerful heavenly metal god was finally dead. She had been killed by a rock falling from the sky. Chapter 1585. A huge amount of information suddenly appeared in Enlin's mind, and the system kept flashing. Congratulations to host for breaking through to the second layer of Divine Weapon Genesis Chi. Congratulations to host for breaking through to the third layer of Divine Weapon Genesis Chi. Congratulations to host for breaking through to the fourth layer of Divine Weapon Genesis Chi. Congratulations to the host. Congratulations to host for breaking through to the ninth layer of Divine Weapon Genesis Chi. His metal cultivation technique had been cultivated to the highest level, and he had obtained the metal authority. A strange energy began to fuse into Enlin's body. Enlin's entire body trembled violently as he cried out in both pleasure and pain, "Ah! Ah!" Su Xiaolan stepped through the air and appeared next to Enlin in a flash. She looked at Enlin with a concerned expression and whispered, "Did you swallow someone else's authority again? Did you obtain a new authority? It's a very satisfying pain, isn't it?" Enlin was at a loss for words in the face of Xiaolan's 3 fatal attacks. As expected of Xiaolan, she was able to see through it with a single glance. At this moment, even the ancient dragon empress couldn't help but fly over. Her sleeves had been completely destroyed, revealing a pair of arms that were as fair as jade. She seemed to be a little exhausted from the battle, and her arms were hanging feebly by her sides. Her beautiful crimson eyes blinked as she sized up Enlin with curiosity. Moments later, she saw that Enlin was no longer in so much pain, so she asked hesitantly, You can absorb all of the powers of the heavenly Tao?" In the battle just now, she had clearly sensed that Enlin had used the power of the Heavenly God series. That kind of supreme heavenly might and supreme nomological power could not be faked. Enlin nodded lightly, admitting it. With so many witnesses present, it was easy to guess. There was really no need to hide it. After receiving confirmation from Enlin, the ancient dragon empress couldn't help but take a deep breath. She didn't say anything and merely looked up into the sky with a disconsolate expression. Under the moonlight, a hint of gentleness and beauty appeared on her face. The heavenly metal god's death created another massive stir on the battlefield. The extermination team members were the most excited, and some of them even began to cheer. "Is there a god in MVP?" Yao Mingxi, the diehard fan, waved his immortal sword with excitement. "Big Brother and really is bad *SS. He killed Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu, the Heavenly Mountain God, and the Heavenly Metal God. Woof." Dabai also waved his claws. Reality has proven that even if sect leader Enlin were to slack off for 100 years, your papa would still be your papa upon his return. No one can change that. Fan number 2, Sun Yulua, stared at the white figure with a scorching light in his eyes. A faint smile appeared on Bai Ling's face. Don't forget the efforts of your teammate. Enlin wouldn't have been able to accomplish such a feat on his own. A smile appeared on Xian Yuancheng's handsome face. That's right. Without the full cooperation of the Celestial Arch, Su Xiaolan, and the ancient Dragon Empress, it would be quite difficult for Enlin to defeat a heavenly god. Su Qianyun nodded in agreement. That's right. This is a team battle, after all, so we can't ignore the contributions of the Celestial Arch and the others. Bai Ling corrected with a cold expression. What I mean is, don't forget that without the support of my heaven-crushing cannon, Enlin and Su Xiaolan would still be buried in that mountain. Su Qianyun, Xian Yuancheng, all of the spectators. So this was what you were referring to when you said you couldn't forget the efforts of your teammates. On the heavenly god Jordan battlefield, the Celestial Arch, who was struggling to hold on, chortled with glee again. Look, heavenly god Jordan. So what if you give up your life for this battle? The heavenly mountain god is dead. The heavenly metal god is also dead. The celestial Thearcha's expression gradually turned cold. And you are going to die for sure. What awaits all of you is total annihilation. Heavenly God Jordan had completely repressed his emotions after activating his 9th divine halo, but his brows were slightly furrowed, and there was a hint of pain and conflict in his eyes. His eyes also drifted toward the heavenly metal god, only to be greeted by the sight of an empty heaven and earth that had been completely destroyed. Thinking back to when he had decided to activate his 9th divine halo, the heavenly mountain god had suddenly appeared and told him that there was no need to sacrifice himself, and that they could take care of everything. At that time, 2 great heavenly deities appeared at the same time, shocking everyone. What kind of glory was this? What kind of power was this? Now, heavenly god Jordan was still alive, but both of the heavenly gods had perished. No, he had activated his 9th divine halo, so he wasn't far from death. How sorrowful and ironic was this within the battlefield between Chun Chun and the heavenly earth god. The two of them were still locked in a stalemate. Chun Chun spoke in an indifferent voice. Let's see. Can you still say that you're going to win? The heavenly earth god fell silent. He looked up at the sky, then at the earth, before finally turning his eyes on Enlin. His aura was completely concealed, as if he had fused with heaven and earth, and no one was able to detect his presence. He's more dangerous than you, the heavenly earth god suddenly said. A rare smile appeared on Chen Chen's face. That's a good thing. A mocking smile appeared on the heavenly earth god's face. It's a pity that I exposed myself too early. I'm going to kill him the next time we meet. You won't be able to do that with me around, Chen Chen said in a firm voice. Everyone suddenly fell silent. Chen Chen and the heavenly earth god looked at each other, and it seemed as if sparks were clashing in the air. Within heavenly god Jordan's battlefield, space crumbled and mountains and rivers surged. One earth-shattering spell technique after another lit up the night sky, making heaven and earth as bright as day. The Phoenix unleashed its most powerful killing technique again, the heaven-crushing Nirvana flames. However, the flames were blasted apart by a single punch from Jordan, and its body was knocked flying for several hundred kilometers. It was clearly a mythological beast of the highest caliber, but it was almost obliterated by that one attack. The 9-colored divine vermilion bird unleashed her 9-colored divine Tao in an attempt to keep heavenly god Jordan at bay, only to be shattered by a single palm from heavenly god Jordan. Even the 9-colored divine vermilion bird was knocked flying by his palm, and the 9-colored divine vermilion bird let loose a shrill cry. After that, the 9-colored divine vermilion bird never returned. Black spirit snake, white spirit snake, and the celestial arch were also fighting with all their might, and they had sustained many injuries, but they were still on the back foot. However, they could see hope. The divine halo above Heavenly God Jordan's head was already cracked, and the black veined patterns all over his body were becoming darker and darker. Heavenly God Jordan had also realized this, and his expression darkened even further. "I'm going to use my final technique to end all of you." He suddenly stood still, and boundless darkness that threatened to engulf all things erupted from the divine halo above his head, obscuring the starlight and moonlight. The celestial Dharch, white spirit snake, and black spirit snake's expressions shifted at the same time. "Ha ha! What a powerful aura! I'll take you back after I retrieve my heaven-crushing seal." The celestial Dharch chortled with glee as he flew into the distance. "I'm going back to retrieve my number 2 treasured sword. Just you wait." Black spirit snake's tail whipped through the air as she flew toward another direction. White spirit snake racked her brains. "I'll go." White spirit snake also flew off in different directions as she spoke. She didn't even look back. Heaven and earth suddenly fell silent. Heavenly God Jordan's sinister smile froze on his face. Chapter 1586. Weren't we supposed to fight to the death? Weren't we supposed to unleash our ultimate techniques to show you how terrifying I am? What was going on with the Heaven Cataclysmic Seal? What was going on with the number 2 treasure sword? What the F***CK was going on? What the F***CK? Heavenly God Jordan's eyes widened, and he finally couldn't help but let loose a string of expletives. The 3 of them were flying in different directions, clearly trying to escape in different directions so that he wouldn't be able to catch up to them. There was no one else in the world who could talk about escape in such a bold and confident manner. Indignation. Exasperation. Indignation. Heavenly God Jordan surveyed his surroundings like a ravenous beast. Bai Ling also flew into the distance on her spatial white fairy, carrying Xianyuan Qing, Xiaohong, Dabai, and the others. Su Xiaolan carried Enlin on her back in her coffin and escaped extremely quickly using her vermilion bird movement technique. The ancient dragon empress was severely wounded, and she was struggling to keep up with Su Xiaolan. As for the 9-colored divine vermilion bird and the phoenix, they were already preparing to flee when Heavenly God Jordan had slapped them away, and they immediately turned tail and fled. When it came to fleeing, mythological beasts like them were the best. At this moment, all of the extermination team members began to flee in unison. As if they had rehearsed this, Heavenly God Jordan was instantly plunged into an extremely awkward situation. The state of 9 divine rings was an irreversible body detonation art. The longer he stayed in this state, the easier it would be for his life force to suffer a backlash. In his current state, there was no way he could withstand the flow of time. No. Even if he was going to die, he was going to take a few of his enemies down with him. Heavenly God Jordan made up his mind, and he turned back to everyone else. They all ran in different directions at the same time because they were certain that he couldn't kill everyone and could only target one person. In fact, he might not even be able to catch up to a single one of them due to the fact that he had lost the initiative. Everything had happened far too abruptly, and Heavenly God Jordan was dazed for a split second, thereby missing out on the best opportunity to pursue his enemies. I'm so angry. Heavenly God Jordan was about to go crazy. He had used his life as the price to obtain absolute power, but his enemies ran away without saying a word? And all of them ran away? Where are your faces? Where is your dignity? What happened to your heroic words of slaying gods and breaking the heavens? Did he feed it all to the dogs? Wait a minute. It seemed like there was still one person who hadn't escaped. Heavenly God Jordan faltered slightly before turning toward the only 2 people who hadn't moved. Chen Chen and the Heavenly Earth God were still locked in a standoff, as if they couldn't see him. Chen Chen, the second heavenly disciple of the heaven-crushing sect. Danger level, heaven rank. He must be eliminated as soon as possible. Heavenly God Jordan murmured to himself as his eyes gradually lit up. He didn't chase after the celestial Dharch and the others. Wasn't there the best hunting target here? Without the celestial Dharch, Black Spirit Snake, and the other powerful beings standing in his way, this was the perfect hunting environment for him. Perhaps this was the will of the heavens. At this moment, Heavenly God Jordan had already reached the God of Creation stage, and his spell techniques were extremely unfathomable, so he naturally possessed exceptional judgment. Chun Chun and the Heavenly Earth God were in a delicate balance. If this balance were to be disrupted, Chun Chun would fall into a state of eternal damnation. Sacrificing myself to kill the second heavenly disciple of the heaven-crushing sect is worth it. Heavenly God Jordan's body flashed as he charged toward the youth with an extremely feeble aura. He had lost the opportunity to kill the celestial Dharch, but he now had an additional opportunity to kill Chun Chun. Heavenly God Jordan was trembling with excitement. In the eyes of the heavenly human tribe, Chun Chun was more important than 3 celestial thearchs. He was a target that the heavenly gods had to kill. Rumble, a boundless, terrifying aura swept forth. It was like a boundless ocean, like a boundless plateau of snow and ice, like a star that struck despair into the onlooker's heart, like the entire world. Heavenly God Jordan unleashed his full power, and his aura was comparable to that of a God of Creation's stage mighty figure. The black divine halo above his head released a dark, silk-like light, which draped a dark feather cloak over his body. It was as if all living beings in this world were being sucked in as well. With the assistance of the dark feather cloak, Heavenly God Jordan's speed was elevated explosively once again, and it was as if he had transcended beyond this world. Even the celestial Dharch and the others were unable to keep up with Heavenly God Jordan's speed. Heavenly God Jordan plunged a hand into the air before dragging an inky black energy sword out of thin air. The energy sword was completely inky black, as if it were a boundless universe. There were 9 peculiar stars shimmering within the universe. 2 stars were situated on either end of the blade of the sword, and they were purple and dreamy. At the center of the blade, there was a golden star that was as dazzling as a star, a blue star that was as blue as the ocean, a white star that was as ethereal as mist, a green star that was brimming with vitality, a clear and translucent orange star, and a sinister and sinister red star. There was also the most important star. It was situated at the tip of the sword, and it was so dark and gloomy that it seemed as if it were going to engulf all of the stars in this world. Not only that, but it was also going to engulf and destroy everything in this world. The power of the 9 divine halos converged into the sword. Heavenly God Technique, Sword of Heaven and Earth, Darkness of Origin. Heavenly God Jordan charged toward Chun Chun before slashing down with the Sword of Darkness in his hand. The Sword of Heaven and Earth was imbued with the laws of darkness, and it was going to engulf everything, regardless of whether it was the earth, the starry sky, the moonlight, the dust drifting through the air, or even space itself. Everything was going to be reduced to eternal darkness and boundless chaos. Boom! Darkness enshrouded the space within a radius of over 500 kilometers, as if it were a massive black ball. There was a power of annihilation wreaking havoc within the ball. Slicing power, gravitational power, death power, karma power. All types of powers were attached to the power of darkness, making it even more terrifying. The celestial Dharch and the others were astonished upon seeing this. Just this attack alone was enough to destroy an entire city or even an entire nation. In fact, in a small world like Earth, just this Sword of Heaven and Earth would most likely be able to tear the entire planet into pieces. Thank God we got away in time. And Lin looked up at the earth-shattering explosion with lingering fear in his heart, and he swallowed nervously. If Heavenly God Jordan had chased after them, then there was almost no chance that they would have been able to survive this attack. Even Enlin was so scared, so Sun Yulua, Yao Mingshi, the Fist Sage, and Dabai were all deathly pale with fear. If Heavenly God Jordan had chased after them, then they would have died for sure. Even though Sun Yulua and the others knew that heavenly god Jordan wouldn't chase after them, Unlin and the celestial Larch were far more valuable than they were. This was also why Unlin and the celestial Larch were able to escape without any qualms. If they could escape, then it would be a win. If they couldn't escape, then they would just have to fight again. Thus, their escape team inexplicably shifted the blame to Chen Chen. Everyone's hearts were on edge at this moment. Chen Chen, was he going to be alright? Chapter 1587. The black halo of light concealed everything. It also unleashed an extremely terrifying engulfment power, which sucked the surrounding plants and earth into the halo of light in a frenzy before annihilating them. The halo of light encompassed an area of over 500 kilometers, but the destructive power it unleashed was over 1,000 kilometers or even 1,500 kilometers. This was an apocalyptic spell technique. Su Xiaolan and the others were only able to avoid being sucked into the black halo of light by relying on their own powers to defend themselves. All of them stared at the halo of light with anxiety and concern for Chen Chen. The halo of light was able to engulf all things, including the divine sense that entered it, so they had no idea what was going to happen within the halo of light. Not long after that, the black halo of light began to shrink. A bottomless, black crater had been engulfed into the ground, and there was nothing there. Space shattered, and chaotic winds wreaked havoc, annihilating everything in the surrounding area. There was no longer any material object within a radius of over 500 kilometers. Unlin knew that when the spell technique was unleashed, even light would be engulfed, and even Tao would crumble and be destroyed. This was true destruction. For all things, the result was an eternity of darkness, and nothing was spared. Everyone stared at the scenes unfolding before their eyes with trepidation in their hearts. Everything had been destroyed. Would Chen Chen, who was situated at the very center of the spell technique, still be safe? When the black halo of light shrank to its smallest size, everyone's heart jolted with shock. There was a piece of land hovering in mid-air. No, to put it more accurately, the piece of land had already been annihilated into nothingness. There was only a piece of land left in the surrounding area. A young man in a coarse linen robe stood barefoot on the piece of land, looking up at the heavenly earth god with an indifferent expression on his face, as if nothing had happened. However, the strange white halo of light emanating from his body was a clear indication of his extraordinariness. Within the white halo of light, every blade of grass, every pebble, every speck of dust was different from the outside world. There was no longer any land beneath the heavenly earth god's feet, but he still stood in midair, as if there was no power that could shake him. He looked at the ring of light that Chen Chen had released and narrowed his eyes. A self-created world, a spotless land. So you've already reached the final step of visualizing the universe, and you can already use your inner universe to influence reality. Chen Chen ignored the heavenly earth god and turned to look at heavenly god Jordan, who was standing outside the white barrier of light with a blank expression on his face. Heavenly god Jordan's face was still filled with incredulity. Even if he racked his brains, he would never have imagined that his full-power attack, a terrifying attack that was comparable to a Genesis tier strike with 9 divine halos, would actually be completely unscathed by Chen Chen. Chen Chen looked at heavenly god Jordan expressionlessly. "Are you done?" Heavenly god Jordan faltered slightly upon hearing this, as if he didn't understand what Unlin was implying. Chen Chen said coldly, "If you're done, then scram." He waved a hand toward heavenly god Jordan. Heavenly god Jordan's heart jolted, but before he had a chance to do anything, his body was struck by a heavy blow. His chest caved in, and his bones and flesh were instantly pulverized. Terrifying power, extremely fast speed. Heavenly god Jordan didn't even have a chance to resist. He threw up a mouthful of blood and was blasted flying for several hundred kilometers before transforming into a black dot in the distance. In the extremely far distance, Unlin and the others were also completely incredulous upon seeing this. Sun Yulua. He blocked Heavenly God Jordan's most powerful attack and remained unscathed? The fist sage. He slapped Heavenly God Jordan flying with a single palm? Dabai. Holy Mother of God woof. They knew that Chun Chun was bad *SS, but they didn't know that he was this bad *SS. Lin couldn't help but turn to the ancient dragon empress beside him, only to discover that she was also staring at Chun Chun with astonishment and amazement on her face. Lin. So even the fourth heavenly disciple didn't know how bad *SS the second heavenly disciple was? Lin thought about this for a moment, and he suddenly felt like something wasn't quite right. The heavenly time god was the most powerful heavenly god below the paramount heavenly gods, and even though she had been completely crushed during her battle against Chun Chun, she had at least managed to wound him. Heavenly God Jordan's ninth divine halo seemed to be no weaker than the heavenly time god, so why couldn't he even wound a single hair on Chun Chun's body? This didn't make any sense. Chun Chun seemed to be able to sense Lin's confusion, and he turned to look at Lin with a rare patient expression. I observed countless worlds in that strange space and attained some enlightenment. Lin was extremely flattered by this sudden revelation. Big Boss Chun Chun, you should focus on your opponent. There's no need to tell me this at a time like this. This delicate-looking youth was cold and aloof to everyone except Lin. This was something that everyone could sense even more clearly now. Su Xiaolan turned to look at the man behind her with a suspicious expression. The ancient dragon empress also turned to look at Lin with a hint of jealousy in her eyes. Lin was completely befuddled. Xiaolan, let me explain. Also, big sister ancient dragon empress, what's with that look in your eyes? There's no need to explain. I'm not suspecting you, Su Xiaolan said with a smile. My master treats you better than he treats me. The ancient dragon empress pursed her lips. Lin. He had fallen into an emotional vortex because of Chun Chun? What the hell was going on? However, Lin really didn't think that Chun Chun would be able to make such a major breakthrough in the strange space created by the heavenly time god's self-detonation. At the time, he was only focused on finding his way back. Was this what it meant to have an exceptional aptitude? A sharp light suddenly flashed through the heavenly earth god's golden eyes as he stared at Chun Chun. There's an opening. He made a peculiar hand seal with his left hand, and his palm faced the sky while his index finger pointed toward the ground. The earth tremored as boundless energy from the veins of the earth flowed for over 1,500 kilometers before converging beneath the heavenly earth god's feet and surging toward his body through his index finger. At the same time, he unleashed a vertical slash toward Chun Chun with his right hand. This was an indescribably vast and boundless power. The bluish-yellow blade projection was extremely condensed, but it wasn't very spectacular. It was only around 1,000 feet in length, which was just the distance between the heavenly earth god and Chun Chun. However, none of the mighty figures dared to underestimate this attack. They could sense a power so vast that it struck them with a sense of insignificance. People often referred to a person's blind confidence as an overestimation of their own abilities. As for Lin and the others, they were witnessing the immensity of heaven and earth with their own eyes, so they were truly struck by just how minuscule they were. For example, the power imbued within the heavenly earth gods / was so vast that it struck despair into the onlookers' hearts. Just looking at it from afar, they were struck by an instinctive sense of horror that made it difficult to breathe. It was as if a boundless continent were crashing toward them. As opposed to calling this bluish-yellow blade projection, it was more accurate to refer to it as a boundless continent with boundless mass. And it was crashing directly into Chun Chun's spotless land. Chapter 1588. Chun Chun's expression was still as calm as ever, but it had also become a little more solemn. Perhaps this was a sign of respect toward the paramount heavenly god for taking the initiative. The greenish-yellow blade projection crashed directly into the white barrier of light. Back then, Chun Chun had used this very same barrier of light to block Heavenly God Jordan's heaven and earth final sword without sustaining any damage. It wasn't as earth-shattering as he had imagined. The blade projection struck the white barrier of light, but it didn't even make a sound. It was as if it had fallen into the calm surface of a lake, sending soundless ripples surging through the air. The ripples on the white barrier of light were imbued with some kind of power that could keep all things at bay. Chun Chun was very close to the heavenly earth god, but he also felt like he was extremely far away, as if he didn't belong to the same world. Unless he transcended beyond this world, he wouldn't be able to touch him. The heavenly earth god was hurtling toward him with a continent in his hand, only to discover that they didn't belong to the same world. So how was he supposed to strike his opponent? Not only that, but the heavenly earth god discovered that the blade projection in his hand was also quickly dissipating. It was being absorbed by the white barrier of light unleashed by Chun Chun before transforming into a very special type of energy that didn't seem to belong to this world. The heavenly earth god showed no signs of stopping upon seeing this. Instead, he slashed downward with even more force, and a hint of excitement appeared in his eyes. Chun Chun, this is your downfall. You tried to absorb my power, analyze my power, and then figure out how to defeat me. However, in order to absorb my power, there has to be a point where it's connected to this world. That point is the true flaw of your spotless realm. Countless streams of information flashed through the heavenly earth god's eyes. Divine calculation. Analyzing and calculating all things in this world. Everything in this world became extremely clear to him. From matter, laws, karma, everything from the sun, moon, and stars to the microscopic particles, all of them had no secrets in his eyes. Even the most powerful analytical technique was unable to analyze an absolutely perfect spell technique. However, Chun Chun's spotless realm was clearly not complete. It was not perfect. Seeing as it was not perfect, his analytical technique would be able to pinpoint its fatal flaw. As long as he could break through Chun Chun's self-created world, he would be able to secure victory. From there, he would be able to kill all of the living beings present. However, when he received the results of the analysis, he was stunned. At that moment, the heavenly earth god felt as if he could see destruction and creation, as well as termination and rebirth. He could see the end of all Tao and the destruction of the heavenly Tao. He could also see the boundless light of human Tao being reforged into the heavenly Tao. The heavenly earth god was rooted to the spot as a boundless sense of peril engulfed his entire body, and he became even more determined to kill Chun Chun. I see. Your spotless realm absorbs the power of my attacks through destruction and creation. The heavenly earth god mused. Chun Chun looked at the amber-like youth in front of him with an indifferent expression and nodded lightly. This is my flaw. If you have the courage to be destroyed by me once, why don't you come and try my world? The heavenly earth god's eyelids twitched. He had assumed that Chun Chun's spotless land had a special hole that could absorb his power. That way, he would be able to use that hole as an opening to break through. However, the art of divination told him that Chun Chun's own world was like a meat grinder. If he wanted to enter, he would first have to be destroyed. How could it be the same? It wasn't the same at all. Destruction before creation and absorption before transformation were two completely different things. Chun Chun's flaw could be said to be a display of power by the creator. Chun Chun was still looking at the heavenly earth god with an indifferent expression. However, the heavenly earth god felt as if he could see through Chun Chun's eyes. You can come and attack me, but let's see if you can withstand the destructive power of my own world. After all, the flaw in Chun Chun's spotless realm was only a flaw that wasn't really a flaw. Did the heavenly earth god have the courage to enter Chun Chun's world? If he could withstand the destructive power of Chun Chun's own world, perhaps he would be able to kill Chun Chun as soon as he entered. However, if he couldn't, then death would await him. The greenish-yellow blade projection was still tearing through the white halo in a frenzy. Boundless weight and boundless energy crashed toward the white halo in a frenzy, as if they were trying to flatten it. If a normal Tao integration stage super mighty figure were to be struck by the power of an entire continent, they would definitely be reduced to mincemeat in an instant. However, it couldn't even break through a single barrier. The heavenly earth god didn't enter Chen Chen's white halo, but he didn't give up on attacking, either. He was going to crush Chen Chen's spotless realm with absolute power. The power of the greenish-yellow blade projection was constantly being destroyed before being absorbed by the white halo. However, the power of the blade projection seemed to be boundless, and no matter how much it was absorbed, it would continue to grow. There was no end in sight. An unimaginably massive weight weighed down upon Chen Chen's shoulders. Chen Chen understood what the heavenly earth god was trying to do. Was he trying to compete in endurance? The heavenly earth god's eyes lit up, and he slammed the greenish-yellow blade projection downward with all his might. Boundless gravitational force crashed downward, as if a boundless continent were crashing into it over and over again. This level of attack was already so terrifying that it was as if a god of creation were crashing down upon Chen Chen with a world of its own. The spotless realm could absorb his energy? That's fine. Go ahead. Let's see how long you can last. The heavenly earth god's battle intent surged. He really wanted to see if his blade of earth would last longer, or if Chen Chen's spotless realm would. That's right, if he couldn't break through the spotless realm, then he would just have to wait until the spotless realm disappeared before slaying Chen Chen. Chen Chen nodded. That's a good idea. This is indeed the best way to break through my defenses. Your attack is as boundless as the earth itself, and as soon as its power begins to wane, new power from the veins of the earth will immediately be injected into it. If I want to last until the power of your blade projection disappears, I'll probably have to absorb the power of the earth equivalent to half of the southern heavenly wing nation. How big was half of the southern heavenly wing nation? That was the power of the earth equivalent to more than 10 earths. As soon as the power of the earth was absorbed by Chen Chen, the heavenly earth god would immediately replenish it, and boundless gravitational force would be enough to crush any living being. Both sides persisted in this way, and the world seemed to have become quiet. Enlin and the others swallowed silently and were hesitating about whether they should intervene. Would they be more of a hindrance if they intervened in a battle of this caliber? Everyone had the same concern. Enlin thought about it for a moment before deciding not to dwell on this issue. He swallowed an immortal pill to recover from his injuries. Time ticked by. The positions of the greenish-yellow earth blade and Chen Chen's dustless land did not change in the slightest. It really was like a painting. A faint sigh suddenly broke the silence. Chen Chen looked at the heavenly earth god. It's a pity that you were too impatient. Chapter 1589. Chen Chen slowly extended his right hand. Perhaps your sword of earth has the upper hand in terms of endurance. However, there's no need for me to be locked in a stalemate with you. The heavenly earth god's pupils contracted slightly, and he instinctively sensed danger approaching. Boundless golden light had already erupted from Chen Chen's right hand. This was an extremely terrifying and boundless power of the earth, which was very similar to the heavenly earth god's power, but also different. This was because its source was the world that Chen Chen resided in. Don't forget that I've been absorbing your power this entire time. The reason why I haven't attacked you for so long is because I want to absorb more power of the earth. Chen Chen extended a single index finger. His index finger expanded infinitely in the heavenly earth god's eyes, as if this finger was the only real thing in this entire world, and everything else could be destroyed by it. Heavenly earth god, let me tell you a secret. Chen Chen looked at the heavenly earth god, and a faint smile appeared on his face. When I unleash my spotless realm, I can attack. He pointed a finger forward, and boundless golden light pierced through the darkness and lit up the heavens. Finger of the heavenly Tao. The space within a radius of over 50 kilometers was instantly shattered into a realm of chaos. The heavenly earth god could sense an extremely pure burst of heaven-crushing intent from that finger. Most importantly, that heaven-crushing intent had fused together with the extremely vast and terrifying power of the earth. This was the power of the earth that Chun had absorbed from the heavenly earth god, which he had destroyed and recreated to create his own power of the earth before returning it all to him. The heavenly Tao was the principle of the operation of all things, the supreme Tao of the unseen world. It was the foundation of this world, and the law upon which all things existed. It was invisible, but it could be seen everywhere. It was uncontested, but it determined the laws of this world. It was the most mighty Tao, as well as the most invincible Tao. However, Chun's fingers seemed to be telling the heavenly Tao that no matter what it was, he was going to completely crush it. As one of the paramount heavenly gods, the heavenly earth god was struck by a sense of peril and threat for the first time. The authority of heaven, the existence of heaven, had been severely challenged at this moment. It was already impossible for him to withdraw his sword of earth to defend himself as the finger was falling too quickly. In the instant that the finger of the heavenly Tao fell, countless pure white crystals materialized on the heavenly earth god's body before forming a suit of shimmering silver armor. Earth Tao armor! Bang! The finger of the heavenly Tao finally clashed with the heavenly earth god. It was as if a star had exploded. Extremely dazzling light illuminated the dark night and even turned it into a vast expanse of gold. Other than the light of the finger of the heavenly Tao, there was nothing else. The light even lit up the entire southern heavenly wing nation, painting the lush green earth with a golden sheen. Hundreds of millions of birds were either interrupted in their cultivation or awakened from their slumber before turning toward the southernmost region of the southern heavenly wing nation with shock and horror on their faces. They didn't know what was happening there. The light emitted from that place was too dazzling, and the true intent contained within it was too terrifying. Although they were very far away, they all felt as if the sky was about to collapse. The heaven-crushing metal energy tore through the earth, creating a golden passageway with no end in sight. The earth was torn apart for thousands of kilometers. Tens of thousands of mountains, countless trees, and even a large number of living beings were affected by the shock waves of the battle. They were engulfed by the energy and completely disappeared from the world. Lin and the others were completely unable to see what was happening. They were about to be blinded by the terrifying golden light. However, even though the light was extremely dazzling, no one could bear to look away. This was an extremely crucial battle that would determine whether the southern heavenly gate could be broken, as well as their future fates. Even Black Spirit Snake, the Celestial Dharch, and White Spirit Snake of the Heaven Mending Sect were hoping that Chun would win this battle. The golden light quickly dissipated, and everything returned to normal, leaving behind a ghastly rift that extended into infinity and beyond, illustrating just how terrifying the finger of the heavenly Tao was. The finger of the heavenly Tao is able to unleash such terrifying power by fusing with the power of the earth? Lin was a little dumbstruck. This technique was more powerful than any of the techniques Chun had unleashed against the heavenly time god. It had completely exceeded his imagination. I don't know. I've never seen Master use a spell technique like this. The ancient dragon empress was also astonished, and her crimson eyes glowed with a faint light. At the center of the battlefield, the white halo had already disappeared. The only piece of land that was hovering in the air had already been pulverized. The heavenly earth god's hand was still in the position of swinging down his sword, but the limitless, greenish-yellow sword of light was no longer in his hand. A young man in linen garments stood in midair, and he extended his index finger before stabbing it into the heavenly earth god's thick armor of earth. A small hole had punctured through the heavenly earth god's semi-transparent armor. However, everyone knew what this entailed. Chun's attack had wounded the heavenly earth god. Lin almost jumped out of his coffin with excitement. Even the paramount heavenly gods of the heavenly Tao were not invincible beings. This was clearly a boost to the human race's morale. The heavenly Earth God looked down at Chen Chen's finger and took a deep breath. "Why aren't you pulling it out yet?" the heavenly Earth God asked in a cold voice. Chen Chen's expression remained unchanged. "It's rare for me to be able to stab it in, so I want to rub against it first." The heavenly Earth God, all of the onlookers. Extremely terrifying energy fluctuations suddenly erupted from the heavenly Earth God's body. Chen Chen immediately withdrew his hand at lightning speed before looking at the heavenly Earth God, as if nothing had happened. The heavenly Earth God was also staring at Chen Chen. The two of them fell silent, and it was as if they had returned to that peculiar standoff from before. Chen Chen extended his other index finger. The heavenly Earth God's eyelids twitched slightly. "Why aren't you leaving? If you don't, I'll give you another finger." A hint of a smile appeared on Chen Chen's face. Even though he couldn't keep the heavenly Earth God here, he wasn't afraid of fighting him. The heavenly Earth God did not appear to have been humiliated. Instead, he looked at Chen Chen with a serious expression before turning to look at Enlin, the ancient dragon empress, Su Xiaolan, the celestial larch, white spirit snake. He seemed to want to remember every living being in this battle. He didn't even let go of the flower and the dog. He glanced at them all. None of the members of the extermination team could escape his gaze. "The next time we meet, none of you will survive." The heavenly Earth God spoke in an indifferent voice as his body transformed into a streak of golden light that merged into the earth. Chen Chen raised his head, his clear and bright eyes gazing at the horizon where the sky and the earth intersected. He said softly, "Is it heading east?" Chapter 1590. Everyone faltered for a long time after the heavenly Earth God's departure. In the end, everyone erupted into raucous cheers. The heavenly Earth God really ran away? That's unbelievable. Great, we won. It wasn't easy, Wah. There were many times when I thought we were going to lose. That's not all. There were many times when I thought we were going to die. It's a pity that big sister Rafaela. Sigh. Everyone was either whooping with excitement or sighing with melancholy. The only thing that made their hearts ache was that the gentle and beautiful Raphael had fallen just like that, leaving them forever. There was no way that a battle of this caliber could go unscathed. In fact, the fact that there were so few casualties was already far beyond everyone's expectations. It could be said that this was a resounding victory. Even though they were consoling themselves, they were still unable to repress the grief in their hearts. Su Xiaolan slowly descended to the ground, and Enlin emerged from his coffin. His body was very feeble, and his features were extremely pale, but he was forcing himself not to faint. Everyone turned to look at the ancient dragon empress. Chen Chen's body flashed, and he also appeared beside the ancient dragon empress. Bai Ling also flew toward them from afar in her spatial white fairy spacecraft. The phoenix and the 9-colored divine vermilion bird circled in the sky, lighting up the night sky with a vibrant glow. Xianyuan Qing, Su Qianyun, Tina, Xiaohong, Sun Yulua, and the Fist Sage all emerged from the spacecraft. The ancient dragon empress storage ring flashed, and a beautiful woman appeared from within. Her body had already been completely healed by the ancient dragon empress. She had her hands crossed over her lower abdomen, and her eyes were closed in a peaceful manner. Her skin was still jade white and translucent, while the soft white angel robe stuck closely to her delicate body, and it brought out the graceful and exquisite curves of her body. Moreover, her beautiful and flawless face faintly revealed a wisp of laziness, causing her to seem like a celestial maiden in deep sleep, and she was breathtakingly beautiful. Everyone's hearts throbbed with pain at the sight of her beautiful features. Most of them had interacted with Rafaela at some point in time. The ancient dragon empress was their teacher when they were cultivating heaven-crushing techniques, and Rafaela was their best healer when they were injured or exhausted. If anyone was injured during cultivation, she would immediately rush over to treat their injuries. Her gentle smile and moving eyes had once made the hearts of all of the 4-9 immortal sex higher-ups sway. At that time, Raphael gave them the most meticulous care and left a super deep impression on them. However, they did not expect that the most gentle and kind woman would end up in the most miserable state in this battle. If not for Raphael, I would have died in this battle long ago. Unlin looked at the woman lying on the ground with reddened eyes and sighed softly. Su Xiaolan nodded in agreement. She healed us from our severe injuries, so even after her death, the Tao integration stage feedback is still focused on us. If not for that, we wouldn't have the strength to fight the other heavenly gods at all. She really is a very good woman, Unlin said. Su Xiaolan nodded in agreement. The two of them had been the closest to where Raphael had fallen, so they had received the most blessings. Not only had they experienced Raphael's divine Tao intent, but they had also witnessed her entire life. Raphael had always been very kind. She didn't mind fighting, and she often helped other children who were in trouble. She did not know how to fight, so the first spell she learned was the healing spell. Every time she used the healing spell on a child who was injured in an accident, she would see them smiling and crying instead of crying. She would feel happy from the bottom of her heart and become more determined to learn the healing spell. How wonderful would it be if she could see the people around her no longer suffering from the torment of illness? I want to become more powerful so that more people can smile again. Little Raphael's goal was very simple. She wanted to heal more people. However, even she didn't think that this goal would take countless years. She had saved countless living beings in her life. There were those who were afflicted by diseases, those who were poisoned, those who had been cursed, those whose species had deteriorated, and those whose bloodlines had collapsed. Raphael used her own efforts time and time again to make these tortured living beings see the beauty and hope of life. That's right, countless living beings revered her as the #1 goddess of the Tai Chu continent. Not only because of her beauty, but also because she had saved countless living beings with her peerless healing spell technique. In the end, Raphael became the first living being on the Tai Chu continent to progress to the Tao integration stage through the power of healing. When the heavenly human tribe attacked and the human race was facing destruction, she was the first one to stand up in the holy paradise and say that she wanted to help the human race. She couldn't just watch as a race was destroyed. Even though the Lightwing clan and the human race were very friendly, this was a matter that concerned the survival of an entire race, and the higher-ups were divided on whether to help the human race or not. Raphael was the first to stand up and express her stance, and it could be said that she played a very important role. After that, she volunteered to join the heaven-crushing sect and fight against the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army. When she made that decision, she was already prepared to sacrifice herself for the human race. However, to her surprise, she was slain by the heavenly earth god. At this moment, Raphael was lying peacefully on the ground. Green grass and flowers were already blooming beneath her. The ancient dragon empress half-knelt onto the ground and stroked Raphael's cheek with a gentle hand. She once said that if she died in battle one day, please bury her on the battlefield so that her remains could transform this tragic battlefield into a beautiful place again. Everyone faltered upon hearing this before tears began to well up in their eyes. The burial site of a Tao integration stage super mighty figure could automatically gather the aura of heaven and earth, thereby transforming that place into a paradise for cultivation. Many mighty figures would choose to be buried in their own sects in order to protect their disciples. However, Raphael said that she wanted to be buried on a bloody battlefield. Her life had come to an end here, so it was better for her to blossom here. Let's bury her here. Chen Chen nodded and said, I'll set up an enchantment barrier that even the heavenly gods won't be able to break through. She'll be very safe here. Everyone buried Raphael on the spot and erected a tombstone for her. Under the nourishment of her body, the ravaged earth was being revitalized at a rate that was discernible to the naked eye. Gradually, under the strange resonance of the heavens and the earth, The area within 100 miles became a fairyland filled with birdsong and fragrant flowers. Furthermore, this change was still slowly spreading. Lin and the others were all astonished to see this. At this moment, Chen Chen was already bowing deeply toward the tombstone. "Thank you, Raphael. I hope you can live happily ever after in the holy region." Everyone also bowed deeply toward the tombstone upon seeing this. All of them had the utmost respect for Raphael. The phoenix fluttered in the air, scattering flaming feathers that resembled flowers in the sky, creating a vibrant and romantic spectacle. The 9-colored divine vermilion bird flew through the sky, leaving a trail of dreamy 9-colored light in her wake. The 2 mythological beasts were also mourning the sacrifice of their extermination team member in their own way. This was the funeral of the healing goddess Raphael, one of the 4 archangels of the Garden of Eden. Chapter 1591. After the funeral, which was simple yet not simple, everyone continued to do what the extermination team was supposed to do. The extermination team had to completely destroy one of the enemy's paths. This wasn't as simple as just destroying the enemy, they had to destroy the crystal as well. After all, this was a battle of attrition. The core of the enemy was the southern heavenly gate. Lin and the others flew toward the gargantuan gate. The southern heavenly gate was over 1,000,000 feet tall and stood between heaven and earth, creating a spectacular sight to behold. Aside from the heavenly earth god, all of the enemies had been killed, so the defensive formation had become extremely fragile, and Chen Chen was able to shatter it with a single finger. Everyone began to approach the southern heavenly gate, and they felt as if their hearts were being tugged at by the white light within the gate, enticing them to enter the gate. Chen Chen cautioned, "Get rid of all distracting thoughts. The gate between the 2 worlds is extremely alluring. If you enter the gate, don't even think about coming back." Everyone was given a fright upon hearing this, and they became even more cautious as they approached the gate. None of them were weaklings, but Chen Chen was sure that there was no chance of them coming back after entering the gate, so it was quite apparent just how terrifying the gate was. "Chen Chen, what's beyond the gate? Why do you say we won't be able to come back after entering?" Lin asked with a curious expression. Chen Chen shook his head. "I don't know what's beyond the gate, but I do know that there's something within the gate that gives me a very dangerous feeling." "A very dangerous feeling?" Lin's expression stirred slightly. Chen Chen had been extremely calm and collected even in the face of the heavenly earth god, but he was now struck by a sense of danger from something within the gate? Could it be that there was something more terrifying than the representatives of the heavenly Tao? Everyone was also wondering the same thing. At this moment, Chen Chen spoke again. "The representatives of the heavenly Tao and the heavenly human tribe are restricted by the will of the heavenly Tao on the Tai Chu continent. What if they're outside the gate? Their powers would most likely be different." Everyone came to a realization upon hearing this. And Lin also came to a sudden realization. During his battle against the heavenly time god, the heavenly time god had told him that as long as her power wasn't restricted, she would be able to determine the past and future with a single glance. She was a mighty heavenly god, and she didn't have a habit of bragging, so there was a very good chance that she was telling the truth. This meant that if Lin were to battle the heavenly time god outside of the restriction of the heavenly Tao, he would most likely be reduced to a pile of dirt with just a glare from her. The joy he felt from the complete victory had faded a little. However, everyone knew that it was more important to get down to business, so they turned their attention back to the southern heavenly gate. The interior of the southern heavenly gate was a vast expanse of whiteness, making it impossible to see what was actually inside. However, there was an extremely strong fluctuation of the 2 worlds. It was obvious that this was a gate that connected to the outside world. The celestial Thearcha's eyes reflected everything in this world, and he used his omniscient eye to analyze the situation before replying. "The passageway between the 2 realms is extremely stable, and it's also extremely massive. It's being maintained by a god of creation stage power, so it won't be easy to completely destroy it. Why are you thinking so much? Just hammer it. No matter what it is, you can only know if it's difficult or not after you hammer it. Unlin was very straightforward. He had to destroy the enemy's crystal. He wasn't a kobold, so how could he destroy it in one strike? He had to destroy it in one strike. Everyone understood this logic, and they all unleashed offensive spell techniques toward the gate. They would only know if their attacks would be effective after they did it once. Boom, 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 the spell techniques exploded on the battlefield, and heaven and earth tremored violently. Even the weakest cultivator here was a return to void stage mighty figure, and there were 6 or 7 Dao integration stage super mighty figures among them. Their combined attacks were capable of destroying heaven and earth. If this were any other place, they would be able to destroy an entire realm in an extremely short time. However, their boundless power was unable to destroy even a single inch of the passageway between the two realms. It was as if it were an indestructible fortress that no one could break through. The interior of the gate was a vast expanse of whiteness, as if it were mocking them for overestimating themselves. "I can't do it, master, I can't break it." Little Red shook her bright red head and said in a sweet voice with a helpless expression on her face. "Harder! Harder!" Unlin panted heavily as he encouraged her. I'm already using a lot of force." Xiao Hong swayed her body as she spoke in a sweet voice. After saying that, she summoned a few hundred kind-looking, half-naked, muscular monks to attack the barrier passage. She didn't even have time to catch her breath while attacking. Even so, there was still no effect. "Let's all use spell techniques imbued with heaven-crushing true intent," the celestial Dharch suddenly suggested. Everyone chimed in unison before unleashing spell techniques that were imbued with heaven-crushing true intent. Chen Chen turned to the celestial Dharch with a hint of surprise on his face. The celestial Dharch had evolved even more thoroughly than he had imagined. Was he going to apply to join the heaven-crushing sect in a few days? Should he be given the position of a heavenly disciple, even though Chen Chen had initially imparted his heaven-crushing techniques to the celestial Dharch in order to make their team more powerful and reduce casualties? The celestial Dharch had undergone such a drastic transformation. The celestial Dharch was a good seedling Chen Chen, and everyone else continued to bombard the passageway between the two realms. It had to be said that the spell techniques imbued with heaven-crushing true intent were very effective. Many visible cracks appeared on the passageway between the two realms like glass shattering. The interior of the door was a vast expanse of whiteness, and the light began to dim. "Crap, the spatial power is beginning to repair itself. Let's work harder. Destroy it in one go." Bai Ling detected a burst of power surging toward them from within. Everyone unleashed their most powerful techniques. Nirvana Heaven-Shattering Flame, Heaven-Shattering Void Explosion, Heaven-Shattering Flying Dragon Slash, Great Sun-Shattering Heaven, Primal Chaos Heaven-Shattering Ball, Heaven-Shattering Supreme Technique Fist of the Heavenly Tao, Heaven-Shattering Supreme Technique Finger of the Heavenly Tao. They didn't know what the passageway between the two realms had done to deserve so many heaven-crushing techniques. Unlin even unleashed his power of the heavenly gods to summon the most lethal golden void lightning to bombard the passageway between the two realms. A terrifying explosion of energy blasted all of the spellcasters flying for tens of thousands of meters. Destructive energy tore through the passageway in a frenzy, pulverizing it into smithereens. The passageway collapsed, and the spatial power disappeared as the white light completely dissipated. The only bridge connecting the two realms had been completely engulfed by destructive energy, and the passageway within the gate returned to chaos. Everyone burst into excited laughter as a sense of elation welled up in their hearts. It was as if the enemy's crystal had exploded and the word "victory" had appeared on the screen after a series of twists and turns. Everyone was filled with elation and excitement. The passageway has already been broken. Now all we have to do is close the two bronze gates and toss them into the chaotic space to erase the coordinate. Then, we'll be able to completely sever our connection with the other side of the gate. A rare smile appeared on Chen Chen's face. Everyone pushed open the gates excitedly upon hearing this. However, they were then embarrassed to find that the gates wouldn't budge. Chapter 1592. The bronze gates were over 1,000,000 feet tall, and they were like two small continents that stood between heaven and earth. They were extremely spectacular, and they struck one with a sense of invisible pressure as they approached, striking one with a sense of insignificance. Unlin and the others were like ants trying to push open a gate. No, they weren't even ants. They were like microscopic organisms trying to push open a gate. However, that wasn't a problem. Unlin was confident that he could slice open a divine mountain over 1,000,000 feet tall with a single strike of his sword. Pushing open a bronze gate over 1,000,000 feet tall would be a little difficult, but it shouldn't be impossible, right? However, he discovered that he had been far too naive when he tried to push open the gate. This bronze gate over 1,000,000 feet tall was no ordinary bronze gate. The extermination team was working together to push open the bronze gate, but it didn't budge in the slightest. That was completely abnormal. If this were a normal bronze gate over 1,000,000 feet tall, any Tao integration stage super mighty figure would be able to push it open with all their might. What's going on? There's something wrong with this gate. Su Xiaolan was perplexed. How about we blow it up instead of pushing it? Xianyuan Cheng suggested. Everyone agreed with Xianyuan Cheng's suggestion. Xianyuan Cheng didn't think that his idea would be accepted by everyone. An excited smile appeared on his handsome face as a sense of satisfaction welled up in his heart. Thus, everyone began their journey of blowing up the gate. Boom, boom, boom. Rumble, 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 bam, 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 bang, 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 pfff, 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 after a series of extremely violent explosions. However, the bronze gate remained completely unscathed. Everyone was in even greater despair this time. What's going on? This isn't a bronze gate. How can there be such a hard bronze gate? Xianyuan Qing scratched his head with a defeated expression as he stared at the gargantuan bronze gate before him. Who would have thought that we wouldn't be able to close this gate after destroying our enemies? How tragic! Cassidy was unable to accept this outcome. The celestial Dharch activated his omniscient eye to conduct an analysis and said, "The bronze gate seems to have fused as one with heaven and earth, and it's secured and protected by an absolutely powerful law." Then, he turned his gaze in another direction, where there were two colorful energy pillars that reached the sky. Perhaps breaking the gateposts is the key. We also blew up the gatepost, but it didn't work, Su Qianyun said softly. Logically speaking, even with the power of the heavenly earth god, Chen Chen shouldn't be afraid, so why can't he break through it? Anlin was a little perplexed. Chen Chen was also at his wits' end. He flew towards the colorful energy pillar and gently touched it. Then, he felt a mysterious power that was frantically absorbing the power in his body. Chen Chen immediately retracted his hand, his expression extremely grave. "Sure enough, there's something wrong with this colorful energy pillar," the handsome youth said. He pondered for a moment as if thinking about something. Suddenly, he turned his gaze to Anlin and said, "Anlin, come and touch it too." I have to touch it too?" Anlin was given a massive fright. From Chen Chen's intense reaction, it was quite clear that there was something wrong with this colorful energy pillar. Why was he asking Anlin to touch it? This was like a person who had accidentally fallen into a pit, only to suddenly tell their friend outside of the pit, "Hey, why don't you try falling in as well?" What a joke! Anlin's heart was filled with rejection. However, he looked at Chen Chen's serious and earnest expression. Anlin hesitated for a moment before flying over. He was just touching a pillar. What was the big deal? He didn't believe that he could get pregnant just by touching a pillar. Anlin took a deep breath before pressing his palm against the pillar. A burst of power immediately surged toward Enlin before quickly dissipating. Enlin blinked as if he were touching an ordinary pillar. He cocked his head to the side and turned to look at Chen Chen as if to ask, "What now?" An ecstatic expression appeared on Chen Chen's face. "You're fine. You're fine. This is fantastic." Enlin's expression darkened. "So you don't even know if I'm going to be fine?" Chen Chen forced himself to calm down, but the scorching light in his eyes became even more intense as he looked at Enlin. "Enlin, try unleashing a darkness-type spell technique to attack the colorful energy pillar," Chen Chen instructed. Enlin refused to comply. "What did you discover? Hurry up and tell me, or I won't do it." Rumble, a series of violent booms erupted throughout heaven and earth. The power of chaos surged violently within the shattered passageway between the two worlds. The self-preservation of heaven and earth caused the spatial rift to gradually close up. Chen Chen yelled in a panicked voice, "Hurry! The spatial rift between the two worlds is starting to close up. Our top priority is to push the gate into the chaotic turbulence. I'll explain everything to you after that." As long as the gate remained, the heavenly human tribe would be able to reconstruct the passageway between the two worlds based on the coordinates of the gate on the Taichu continent. If they lost the gate, the coordinates would disappear, and the passageway between the two worlds would disappear, making it far more costly for the heavenly human tribe to reconstruct the passageway between the two worlds. Enlin was naturally aware of the severity of the situation. He had just used the power of the heavenly gods instead of any darkness-type spell techniques to destroy the gate. Now that Chen Chen had suggested it, he had no choice but to use it. "Little Xie!" Enlin called out as his evil-slaying sword flew out of its scabbard, drawing a beautiful arc through the air before landing in his hand, upon which a vast and domineering dark sword true intent soared into the sky. Evil sword technique. Royal Divine Monarch. Enlin slashed his evil-slaying sword toward the colorful pillar of energy over 1,000,000 feet in length. Inky black sword intent instantly obscured the entire sky, extending for over 50 kilometers. It was as if the paramount aura of a divine monarch had erupted from the sword as it slashed through the air in a black arc bam. The pillar, which seemed to have existed for countless years, was suddenly penetrated by the black sword intent. The black sword intent continued onward, and the pillar seemed to wail with anguish before cracking open. Whoosh! The dark black sword aura sliced through the energy pillar that reached the clouds in half. Everyone's eyes widened as they stared blankly at the scenes unfolding before their eyes. It really did get sliced open. My God, we weren't able to break through it even with our combined powers. Master is so powerful. God and his bad *SS? Sun Yuluo, Xianyuan Qing, White Spirit Snake, and the others all exclaimed with excitement and elation as they stared at the scenes unfolding before their eyes. Enlin continued and slashed his sword toward the other energy pillar. The other energy pillar also crumbled violently under Enlin's attack. The two bronze doors let out a creaking sound, which changed due to the collapse of the pillars. Everyone pushed the bronze gates into the space outside. Chen Chen yelled with excitement. The extermination team yelled in unison as they pushed the gates with excitement. The bronze gates that they had been unable to move last time were now being pushed into the shattered space. The shattered space slowly closed. The southern heavenly gate no longer existed. Chapter 1593. The southern heavenly gate had completely disappeared. There were only two shattered pillars left in this world. The energy fluctuations emanating from the pillars had disappeared into the chaotic turbulence. As for the bronze gate, it had already disappeared into the chaotic turbulence. Everyone looked at the scene in front of them, and their hearts were in turmoil. The southern heavenly gate that has stood for several decades has finally been broken by us. Sun Yulua stared at the empty southern heavenly gate with a slightly dazed expression. I can't believe this is all real. Merlin was also in disbelief. It really wasn't easy, but we did it. Su Qianyun's dreamy blue eyes were already slightly red, and an indescribable sense of accomplishment and lingering fear welled up in her heart, making her want to cry for some reason. There's a saying on the Tai Chu continent that the heavenly gate is unbreakable. I really want all of those living beings to see this for themselves. Black Spirit Snake spoke with a smile. Su Xiaolan turned toward Enlin with a faint smile. We have to thank a certain person for making such a bold decision. It was exactly because of this decision that we were able to achieve such an astonishing feat. When the others heard this, they suddenly came to a realization. It was indeed someone who played the most crucial role in this matter. When the entire world thought that it was impossible to break through the heavenly gate, he was the first person to step forward and confidently say that he was going to break through all obstacles. Regardless of whether it was Su Qianyun, Xianyuan Cheng, the Celestial Dharch, or Chen Chen, all of them turned to look at Enlin. That's right, it was Enlin's inexplicable confidence that had infected them and made them accompany him on this adventure. In the end, they really did achieve such an impossible feat. If anyone else had invited them to destroy the heavenly human tribe, they would have slapped them in the face without hesitation. However, this was Enlin, a legendary figure who had made the impossible possible over and over again, so they chose to believe him. Regardless of whether it was as a member of the 4-9 Immortal sect or as a friend of the sect leader, Enlin always had a kind of magic that could make people around him choose to trust him. Perhaps some people wouldn't dare to believe him, but after experiencing so many face slaps, they would definitely be conquered by Enlin very quickly. Black Spirit Snake, White Spirit Snake, and the Fist Sage were all quite surprised to see this. Enlin is the founder of the extermination team? Black Spirit Snake was astonished. She had thought that such a bold decision would be made by the Celestial Dharch or Chen Chen. Who would have thought that it would be Enlin? However, when she thought of Enlin's past experiences, she felt relieved. Enlin had always been like this, going against the heavens. Oh, Senior Enlin is so awesome. White Spirit Snake's eyes lit up with reverence and reverence. Enlin spoke in a modest manner. You don't have to look at me like that. I was only the founder of this operation. Everyone worked together to complete this mission. Without any of us, this mission wouldn't have been able to be as perfect as it was today. All of the extermination team members were filled with a sense of accomplishment upon hearing this. All of them had joined the extermination team with the determination to die. They had already sacrificed enough courage and strength for the survival of the human race. Therefore, they fully deserved this honor. Enlin turned toward the graceful vermilion bird with a smile on his face. Of course, our vermilion bird princess also contributed greatly. You're also a member of our extermination team, so the human race won't forget your contributions. Do I count? The 9-colored divine vermilion bird faltered slightly with elation in her heart. She was struck by a sense of accomplishment, as if she and Enlin had accomplished something world-class. However, she suddenly came to her senses a moment later. Enlin, don't drag me down with you. The Southern Heavenly Wing Nation's attitude toward the heavenly human tribe was neutral. What? You've screwed me over. You be *starred. You're such a jerk. Everyone burst into raucous laughter. Enlin also scratched his head sheepishly. Su Xiaolan looked up at the vermilion bird with a faint smile on her face, and she felt like she was quite adorable. The image of the vermilion bird princess risking her life to escape with Enlin in her arms was still fresh in her mind, and it was exactly because of this that she was quite fond of the vermilion bird princess. Under the starry sky, the extermination team's joyful laughter reverberated through the air, and the atmosphere was unprecedentedly relaxed. After experiencing a battle of life and death together, everyone had become a lot closer to one another. Even the Fist Sage and Xianyuan Qing, who had only known each other for a short period of time, were discussing the power of the explosive fist in a harmonious manner. Of course, the main point of their discussion was how to handle the relationship between the Southern Heavenly Wing Nation and the Heavenly Human Tribe. If all of the heavenly human tribe forces had been destroyed, then things would be easier to handle. After all, there were no witnesses. However, the heavenly earth god had escaped. He had witnessed the vermilion bird princess risking her life to save Enlin and Su Xiaolan, then attacking the heavenly god in the end. The situation was completely different now. It could even be said that the vermilion bird princess had indirectly expressed the southern heavenly wing nation's stance. The bird tribes of the southern heavenly wing nation were very likely to be targeted by the heavenly human tribe. The vermilion bird princess was very distressed by this. At the time, Enlin and Su Xiaolan were both about to die, and she didn't think too much about it. All she wanted to do was save them. Now that she thought back to it, she realized just what a huge mistake she had made. This was a mistake that could even threaten the survival of her entire race. There was no good ending for going against the heavens. She was very remorseful about this, and a few of her beautiful feathers had fallen off from her body. Everyone discussed the vermilion bird princess situation in earnest. In the end, they could only come up with two very exasperated solutions. The nine-colored divine vermilion bird could either join the Kingdom of the Nine States United Army with the bird tribes of the Southern Heavenly Wing Nation. The other option was for the nine-colored divine vermilion bird to officially announce that she was no longer a part of the Southern Heavenly Wing Nation's Sun Tree forces. She would disassociate herself from the Southern Heavenly Wing Nation. If the Heavenly Human Tribe had any objections, they could come and find her. After that, she could find a safe place to hide and wait for everything to come to an end. Alternatively, she could join the 4-9 Immortal sect and have fun with everyone. The Vermilion Bird Princess thought about it for a moment and decided that the second option was more viable. As for joining the 4-9 Immortal sect and have fun with everyone? Did they really think she was an idiot? The Vermilion Bird Princess was a proud and carefree person. She was not going to risk her life to fight the heavenly human tribe with the 4-9 Immortal sect. What a joke! She would never do such a thing. Chapter 1594. The Vermilion Bird Princess chose to leave the Southern Heavenly Wing Nation and find a place to hide for now. She would only reappear after the human race was eradicated, or after the heavenly human tribe and the heavenly gods were eradicated. Everyone expressed their understanding of the nine-colored divine vermilion bird's decision. The Vermilion Bird Princess was quite good at hiding. There was no place she couldn't go. After taking care of the Vermilion Bird Princess, Enlin turned to Chen Chen again. "Can you tell me my secret now? Why was I able to break through those two colorful energy pillars?" There were so many people present, but Chen Chen had asked him to use a dark-type spell technique. Everyone knew that Chen Chen definitely knew something about Enlin. Everyone turned to look at Chen Chen with curiosity in their eyes. Chen Chen's eyes flashed and he fell silent. An expectant expression appeared on Enlin's face as he looked at Chen Chen. "You promised me that you would tell me my secrets after I destroyed all of these pillars." Chen Chen blinked with a sincere expression. But I want to go back on my word now." Enlin. Everyone. Enlin was dumbstruck. Never would he have thought that this would be the response he was getting. "You're the second heavenly disciple of the heaven-crushing sect. How can you go back on your word?" Enlin was astonished. "I'm just a normal person." Chen Chen heaved a forlorn sigh. "Do I not even have the right to go back on my word as a human?" Enlin. Everyone. A big shot was putting on a pitiful expression. Did he have any shame? Enlin felt like he was about to burst into laughter. He really wanted to beat Chen Chen up, but he was no match for him. How could he not feel about this? Chen Chen hesitated momentarily upon seeing Enlin's expression, but he still couldn't help but say, "There's no harm in telling you, but I hope you can keep this a secret in case some bad karma arises." He suddenly unleashed a halo of light as he spoke, which enshrouded himself and Enlin within. This was Chen Chen's own world, a spotless land. Su Xiaolan, the celestial Larch, and the others were suddenly unable to see Chen Chen and Enlin clearly. It was as if a layer of mosaic had been censored over their faces, and they couldn't even hear their voices. Ah! How can this be? The vermilion bird princess was eagerly anticipating this earth-shattering secret, but the two of them were whispering about it in secret. This was driving her crazy. Everyone felt as if they were holding back a mouthful of blood. If you don't want them to know, then don't say it in public. I have a big secret, but I'm not going to tell you. I'm only going to tell Enlin. It really makes people want to vomit blood. Su Xiaolan, on the other hand, was very calm. She knew that as long as she asked Enlin wouldn't hide anything from her unless it was an extremely special situation, so she was very confident. Enlin entered Chen Chen's spotless land, and he suddenly felt as if Chen Chen had become extremely holy and mighty, as if he were the paramount god of heaven and earth, someone who would not tolerate any blasphemy. This was a very familiar feeling. Enlin came to a sudden realization. Wasn't this the same feeling that Tina had given him after he entered the divine mirror world? Which meant that in this spotless land, Chen Chen was the heavens. The fact that a spotless land could appear on the Tai Chu continent was extremely astonishing. This proved that Chen Chen's own world could already interfere with the reality of the Tai Chu continent. I'm talking to you here, and no one else can hear me. Chen Chen's expression suddenly became extremely serious. I'm going to tell you your secret, and I hope you can bury it in your heart forever. If it gets out, the changes that will follow will be beyond your control, understand? Enlin faltered slightly upon hearing this before nodding. I promise. That was what he said, but he was thinking in his heart, I'm just a normal person. Don't I have the right to go back on my word? That's impossible. Chen Chen continued. I'll have to start from when I came into contact with the colorful energy pillar. At the time, I was immediately sucked away by an extremely terrifying engulfing power. One has to realize that I've cultivated a special cultivation method that allows me to sever my karma with the heavens. Even a normal heavenly god wouldn't be able to suck away my power in such a domineering manner. Enlin nodded in agreement upon hearing this. He could tell from Chen Chen's expression that he had been taken advantage of. However, Chen Chen still wanted him to touch that pillar. If this were anyone else, Enlin would have smashed them with his hammer a long time ago. So how did you come up with the idea for me to touch the pillar? Enlin asked. Chen Chen extended a finger. The colorful energy pillar is imbued with the power of the heavenly Tao, and it's a darkness-type power. You possess the Tian Ming Tao physique, so the heavens will not reject you. Enlin nodded in agreement. What she said made sense. He had heard something similar from the first heavenly disciple of the abyss of evil, the Night Monarch. The Night Monarch and Tao Lord Luya also possessed the Tian Ming Tao physique, so he wasn't special. Chen Chen extended a second finger. This alone isn't enough. The second point is the most important. You possess the two paramount heavenly gods of wind and lightning, so if the pillar is also imbued with the power of the heavenly gods, then you should be able to resist it to a certain extent, but I've blasted the pillar with the power of the heavenly gods, and it didn't work at all. Enlin was perplexed. Chen Chen extended a third finger. This is the third point I'm going to tell you about. A profound light suddenly appeared in the youth's eyes, and the atmosphere gradually changed. Enlin, you probably don't even know who you are, right? Enlin smiled. I am the sect leader of the 4-9 Immortal sect, the war god of the celestial court, the chef god of the celestial court, the heavenly lightning god, the tamer of divine lightning, the kingdom of the 9 states. Stop. Chen Chen massaged his brows. His head was throbbing with pain. The tense atmosphere had been shattered just like that. What I'm saying is, you don't know who you really are. Chen Chen looked at Enlin. Think about it. Heavenly Goddess Lin Yu's attitude toward you. Why did she target you? Why did her emotions fluctuate so much whenever she saw you? In particular, what she said to you prior to her death. Lin faltered momentarily as the image of a devastatingly beautiful heavenly goddess flashed through his mind. The heavenly god with golden eyes and waist-length white hair spoke in a soft yet sorrowful voice. Lin, are you willing to be my friend? When you stare into the abyss, but the abyss ignores you, that's great. We're still friends in the end. I wanted to kill you before following you. Who would have thought that we'd still be alive and become friends? I'm waiting for you in death and eternal darkness. Lin didn't think too much about these inexplicable words. Now that he thought about it, all of the clues connected together, and they gave him quite the fright. Chun ignored Lin's expression as he looked at Lin. What kind of power can absorb the paramount powers of the heavenly gods for its own use? What kind of existence can make the most powerful beings of the heavenly human tribe rely on and be reluctant to part with? The final divine halo of a divine heaven stage cultivator is darkness, right? Who could it be that they're trying to follow? If there's a power that can even devour my power, then that's probably the only power that has the right to do so. As for the power that it left behind in the energy pillar, the best way to do that is to use its own power to break through it. Lin's features paled slightly. A certain possibility had just been revealed to him, and he found it a little difficult to breathe. Chun asked in a calm and collected manner, Lin, what would you do if you were the paramount heavenly god of darkness? Chapter 1595. There were 6 paramount powers of the heavenly Tao. Sky, earth, ocean, life, light, and darkness. But now, Chun was asking what he should do if Lin was the heavenly darkness god. Lin's lips twitched. Heavenly darkness god? Did he have something like that? If so, why didn't the system notify him? Why couldn't he use the power of the heavenly darkness god? If he didn't, then how was he going to explain heavenly goddess Lin Yu and the colorful energy pillar? He couldn't just assume that a divine heaven stage heavenly human tribe mighty figure would spout nonsense before his death, could he? Lin's mind was in a mess. He was instinctively rejecting that identity, but he was also extremely afraid that that identity would bring him massive changes. The heavenly darkness god was indeed very bad *SS, but what it represented was going to completely change his life. Didn't that mean that he, Lin, was not a human, but rather a part of the heavenly Tao? Lin simply couldn't accept this. There had to be a problem somewhere. Lin's brows furrowed as he racked his brain for an answer. Chun didn't press Lin for an answer, but he didn't press him for an answer. This had to have something to do with the system. But what kind of role did the system play in this matter? Devouring a heavenly god's authority and thus being able to use the authority's power. Is it the power of the darkness authority, or the power of the system? A short while later, Lin looked up at Chun again. I have a question. Please go ahead, Chun replied without any hesitation. Do you know where Daolord Luya is? Lin asked. Lin felt like it was time for him to ask that old man some questions. Daolord Luya? Chun's brows furrowed slightly before relaxing again. He seemed to have encountered something extremely joyous over 100 years ago, and he's now on vacation in another world. The veins on Lin's forehead bulged, and he was struck by the urge to punch someone. What the F***ck? He's throwing the F***king system at me, so that's a joyous occasion, isn't it? Holy sh**t. I'm in dire straits here, but he's on vacation in another world. Lin got angry just thinking about it. What's wrong with you? Chun stared blankly at Lin, who was suddenly angry. It's fine. Lin smiled. I'll leave this place. Chun wanted to say something but hesitated. In the end, he couldn't help but say, Lin, I have something to say, but I don't know if I should say it. I shouldn't say it. Absolutely not. Lin interrupted. Chun choked upon hearing this before continuing with a stern expression. I don't care whether you're the heavenly darkness god or not. All I want to ask is, if you were the heavenly darkness god, which side would you stand on? Enlin looked at everyone outside the halo of light with a smile. My Tao partner, my friends, my disciples. They all live in the kingdom of the 9 states, and they are all humans. I will protect them with everything I have. Chen Chen lowered his head and heaved a sigh of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. He looked up at Enlin with a smile. Our heaven-crushing sect has chosen the right person. I hope you'll continue to live up to that promise. This was the first time Enlin had seen Chen Chen reveal a pure and youthful smile. In stark contrast to his cold and expressionless face, his smile was very natural and full of vitality, which was very comforting to look at. He faltered slightly upon seeing this. Let's go, Chen Chen said. Enlin came to his senses and nodded. The halo of light around the spotless realm disappeared. The 2 people who had been censored reappeared before everyone's eyes. Everyone couldn't help but gather around to look at Enlin with wide eyes. They didn't say anything, but their intentions were quite clear. They were waiting for Enlin to reveal something. Enlin thought to himself for a moment before deciding to reveal some important information. Chen Chen said that I might be very bad *SS, and I think he's right. Everyone. Chen Chen. Everyone felt as if there was a bottomless pit in their stomachs. They were already feeling very bad that they couldn't get a piece of Enlin's secret, but now Enlin had dealt them a critical blow. Yiling couldn't help but burst into laughter. Master really likes to tell the truth. The celestial Dharch gave her a thumbs up. Not only did you gloss over it, but you also flexed along the way. All of the other members also burst into laughter upon hearing this, and no one pursued the matter any further. The celestial Thearcha's voice transmission talisman also lit up at this moment. Emperor Chang Xing's voice transmission talisman sounded from within. His voice was extremely excited, and everyone felt as if he were laughing like a child. Celestial Dharch, you succeeded. You actually succeeded. How do you know? The celestial Dharch suddenly realized that he hadn't told anyone about the battle yet. Emperor Chang Xing replied with an excited expression. The heavenly human tribe on the eastern, central, western, and northern fronts have all begun to retreat despite having the upper hand. Furthermore, they've retreated for over 50,000 kilometers. It's quite clear that they're afraid of a certain power. I've thought about it for a long time, and only your power fits the description. The celestial Dharch was enlightened upon hearing this. The heavenly human tribe on the southern front had been completely wiped out, and the heavenly human tribe on the other fronts had most likely already received news of this. They most likely didn't want to be the next front to be destroyed, so they had all changed their battle styles. Ha ha! Who would have thought that the heavenly human tribe would be afraid? This is so satisfying. Emperor Chang Xing was still chortling with glee. He felt like he had finally been able to vent all of the grievances he had endured for several decades. A faint smile appeared on the celestial Thearcha's face. Don't get too cocky yet. The battle has only just begun. The 2 emperors chatted for a while longer before hanging up the voice transmission talisman. Everyone knew that it was time for them to part ways. Rather than saying goodbye, it was time for the extermination team to make a triumphant return. I have to return to the Celestial Court to officially announce my return and make arrangements for the Kingdom of the 9 States United Army, the Celestial Dharch said. Little Bai and I have to go to Nuwa's Cabin of Life first, Black Spirit Snake said. White Spirit Snake waved her tiny hands with a wide grin. Senior and Lin, Big Sister Black and I will be back soon, and then we'll fight by your side. The adorable vermilion bird princess had transformed into the gorgeous and graceful 9-colored divine vermilion bird, and her enchanting voice reverberated through the air. I'm going to lay low for a while. Do your best, everyone. I hope you're the final winners. All of the extermination team members waved goodbye to the beautiful divine vermilion bird in the sky with wide smiles on their faces. The divine vermilion bird's gem-like eyes reflected the white-robed figure, and after taking a deep glance at him, It spread open its wings and flew toward the west. Enlin, Su Xiaolan, and the others sat on Bai Ling's spatial white ferry before flying back to the 4-9 Immortal Sect. The battle at the southern heavenly gate had officially concluded. Not long after, the news spread at a terrifying speed and instantly spread across the entire continent. The southern heavenly gate had been destroyed, and the entire world was astonished. Chapter 1596. The news of the celestial Dharch of the celestial court, the sect leader of the 4-9 Immortal Sect, Enlin, the great empress of the Snow Tribe, High Priestess Mengji, and Shangguan Yi all spread throughout the entire Tai Chu continent. However, that wasn't the most shocking news. The entire Heavenly Human Tribe United Army had been annihilated. 3 Dao Integration Stage Super Mighty Figures and a dozen or so Heaven Pioneer Stage Great Generals had perished. The news that followed was even more terrifying. The impact of this news was like a nuclear bomb, striking all living beings on the entire Tai Chu continent with incredulity. Countless powerful beings fell silent, and countless mighty figures were dumbstruck. The extermination team traveled south, slaying 9 Heaven Pioneer Stage Great Generals, 2 Divine Heaven Stage Heavenly Humans, and 2 Heavenly Gods outside the southern Heavenly Gate. Even the Heavenly Earth God had to flee in defeat. The passageway between the 2 worlds of the southern Heavenly Gate had been destroyed, and the southern Heavenly Gate no longer existed. Waves of shock surged through the entire continent upon hearing this news. Countless living beings drew sharp intakes of breath, as if they were listening to a heavenly book. 9 Heaven Pioneer Stage Great Generals? It was quite an exaggeration, but it was still acceptable. But 2 Divine Heaven Stage Heavenly Humans? These legendary God of Creation stage powerful beings had never died in the history of the Heavenly Human Tribe, but now 2 of them had died? What kind of joke was this? Furthermore, 2 heavenly gods had been slain in quick succession, and a paramount heavenly god had escaped. This was completely beyond the imagination of all living beings. In the past, this was something that they wouldn't even dare to imagine. But now, it was happening right before their eyes. None of the living beings dared to believe this news, but it had been verified by many first-rate powers. The Heavenly Human Tribe United Army had been forced to retreat for over 50,000 kilometers, thereby confirming the authenticity of this news. So, just who was this extermination team that had achieved such a glorious feat? All of the living beings present had their eyes glued to the extermination team. This was a team with such a low-key name, but it had now become the most dazzling existence on the entire continent. This was a stark contrast that made everyone realize just how badass the extermination team was. Look at how inconspicuous and inconspicuous their name was, yet what they were doing was earth-shattering. The extermination squad was tasked with breaking through the most difficult path in the world, a path more difficult than ascending to the heavens. That was because the extermination squad was tasked with breaking through the path of the heavens. There wasn't a single cultivator in the world who wasn't curious about the extermination team. Right at this moment, the 4-9 Immortal Sect seemed to have responded to the cries of all living beings on the continent, and they officially announced the list of extermination team members. The Return to Void stage mighty figures included Merlin, Cassidy, Dabai, Xiaohong, True Nuclear Celestial Immortal, Setting Moon Celestial Immortal, Missing and Celestial Immortal, Tina, Lu Qianhuan, Sun Yuluo, Yao Mingxi, Bai Ling, the Fist Sage, and Lin Dao Integration Stage. Super mighty figures included the Divine Phoenix Maiden, Little Huang, the Celestial Dharch, the Ancient Dragon Empress, Raphaela, White Spirit Snake, Black Spirit Snake. There was also a very special person, the second heavenly disciple of the heaven-crushing sect, Chen Chen. When the living beings of the world saw this lineup, they were all shocked. It had to be said that every single one of them was a great figure whose name shook the continent. The lineup was so luxurious that it could be said to be unique in the world. All living beings were able to gain a better understanding of this shocking feat from this incomparably powerful lineup. This was truly a well-prepared and unexpected surprise attack. After all, only such a badass lineup could accomplish something like this. Many rational mighty figures were still in disbelief, thinking that a heavenly god-level enemy like this was not something that could be taken care of. However, reality was staring them in the face, and they had no choice but to accept it. As such, they could only sigh in admiration at how badass the extermination team was. Most importantly, when all of the living beings learned that the team leader wasn't Chen Chen, the celestial Dharch, Black Spirit Snake, or any of the other super mighty figures at the Tao integration pinnacle stage. Instead, it was a return to void stage cultivator by the name of Enlin. Countless living beings began to think back to this legendary figure from 100 years ago. The current sect leader of the 4-9 Immortal sect had returned. Many well-known newspapers and magazines on the Tai Chu continent used the words, "The Return of the Monarch," as the headline of this earth-shattering event, expressing their reverence and fanaticism toward that legendary figure. There was no need to doubt Enlin's influence. Perhaps many people would forget his name in the span of 100 years, but if his name were to resound throughout the entire continent again, it would set off a chain reaction that would make him even more popular than before. Many seniors who had lived for over 100 years would recount Enlin's legends to their juniors with relish. All of his stories were full of twists and turns, and all of them made for great conversation topics. Many powerful beings at the soul formation pinnacle stage praised Enlin with abandon in order to leave a good impression on this Lord of Transcendence who could help others transcend tribulations. Thus, Enlin's name had exploded throughout the entire Tai Chu continent. The 4-9 Immortal sect also exploded as everyone discovered that most of the members of the extermination team were from the 4-9 Immortal sect. The 4-9 Immortal sect had become a legendary sect again. Not only was it the most powerful sect among the 5 great sects, but it was even approaching the level of influence of the Celestial Court. The Kingdom of the 9 States United Army, as well as the Allied Powers, had transformed into a sea of elation. The Spirit Lake Realm, the Kingdom of the 9 States, the Holy Paradise, the Demonic Realm, the Dragon Tribe of the East Sea, and the West Sea Alliance were all in high spirit. The extermination team had destroyed one of the heavenly human tribe routes, giving them the first glimmer of hope after several decades of arduous battles. That's right, the extermination team had proven through their actions that the heavenly human tribe could be defeated, and so could the heavens. The extermination team had become a legend and a team of hope. News of Raphaela's death spread throughout the entire continent along with the destruction of the southern heavenly gate. Her death made this battle even more tragic, but it also diluted some of the joy of victory. Raphaela was simply far too popular across the entire continent. The death of the number 1 goddess of the Tai Chu continent struck countless living beings with grief, and they all mourned for the kind and gentle archangel. Not only were the Kingdom of the 9 States Alliance mourning for her, but even the Heavenly Human Tribe, Creation Realm, and Western Heavenly Dragon Forest were also mourning for her. The reason for this was none other than the fact that her healing light had shone in those places before. The Tai Chu continent mourned for her even more than the war. The Garden of Eden even held an unprecedented funeral for her to celebrate her heroic deeds to the entire continent. In the eastern region of the Tai Chu continent, in the Kingdom of the 9 States, ever since the all-out war erupted across the entire continent, it had been a long time since there had been so much celebration. All of this seemed to have been triggered by the return of a certain man. At this moment, that man had already returned to his sect and was resting. Chapter 1597. A storm was brewing in the outside world. The extermination team was renowned across the entire continent. Enlin's name resounded across the entire continent again. He was the team leader of the extermination team, but he was currently in seclusion at the 4-9 Immortal sect, meditating and recuperating as he watched the clouds roll by. During the past few days, Enlin had been recuperating at the sect. After all, He would only be able to prepare for more intense battles in the future if he was in a better state. His body had already become extremely frail, and his legs had turned to jelly, to the point where he had to be supported by Yi Ling as he walked. Su Xiaolan was also in a very poor state. She had unleashed her self-detonations without any regard for the consequences, and she had even injured her Tao foundation. If it weren't for the fact that Raphaela's divine Tao reciprocation had healed her Tao foundation, she probably wouldn't even be able to progress in her cultivation base in the future. Two critically ill patients who had overexploded their bodies lay side by side on the recliner. Under the warm sunlight, they leisurely looked at the blue sky and white clouds in the sky, feeling the cool breeze caressing their faces. Yi Ling was wearing a black Taoist robe, and she was feeding fruits to her master and his wife in an obedient manner. "Master, the Kingdom of the Nine States News Agency has chosen you as the Man of the Year." Yi Ling held a spirit jade grape between her slender fingers as she placed it into Enlin's mouth with a seductive smile. Enlin was quite elated to hear this, and he turned to the divine maiden beside him with a wide smile. "Su Xiaolan, don't you think I'm bad *SS? Bad *SS, bad *SS. Su Xiaolan chimed in with a lazy expression. Yi Ling also fed a spirit jade grape to Su Xiaolan with a wide grin. Master's wife has actually won the Man of the Year award 15 times in the past century, Enlin. Su Xiaolan patted Enlin's head with a faint smile on her face. "You're already doing very well. You're just a little bit behind me. Keep up the good work." Enlin almost threw up a mouthful of blood. "A little bit? That's more like a galaxy." Yi Ling couldn't help but burst into laughter. For some reason, she was quite amused by her master's wife's humiliation. The warm sunlight shone down upon her body. The young girl couldn't help but look up at the sky. Her clear and spirited eyes reflected the golden sun, as if it contained light. She smiled. "The weather today is really nice. I hope it stays this way." In the western region of the Tai Chu continent, on a boundless ocean, the seawater within a radius of over 50 kilometers surged into the sky like a fountain. In the sky there was a small continent that was being propped up by a massive fountain. On the continent there were immortal mountains and spirit rivers, mountains and grasslands covered in flowers, and there were countless exquisite and gorgeous palaces. There were even waves of silk-like multicolored light drifting in the void, making it look like an immortal paradise. This was the core base of the West Sea Alliance, the immortal land above water. A beautiful mermaid with skin as fair as jade was lying on a large, colorful bubble floating in the air, looking at the newspaper in her hand with a smile. Her blue fishtail gently slapped the bubble behind her, and she appeared to be a little excited. "Boss Enlin is so awesome. My boss is still my boss." The mermaid's face was full of happiness and pride. She was Enlin's underling, Lan Xiaoni. In the past 100 years, this little brother Lan, who used to love to cry, had steadily sat in the position of the leader of the West Sea Alliance. He ruled over the forces of the West Sea, including the 2 great ancient clans, the 10 great sea demon tribes, and hundreds of forces of various sizes. In total, there was an army of over 1 billion sea demons. After a long period of tempering, she already possessed the noble and holy temperament of the goddess of the West Ocean. Not only was her appearance impeccable, but she also emanated a kind of supreme dignity. This was the leader of the West Sea Alliance in the eyes of outsiders. However, when Lan Xiaoni saw the news about Enlin, she reverted back to her usual feeble, mischievous, and hopeful demeanor. A sense of dependence welled up in her heart, as if she had someone to rely on. At a time like this, Lan Xiaoni really wanted to let go of all of her burdens and enjoy Boss Enlin's protection. This thought had only just appeared in her mind when she shook her head to get rid of this thought. No, now is not the time to be a lazy bum. Lan Xiaoni looked down at the Kingdom of the Nine States newspaper in her hand, and she stared at Enlin's handsome and radiant image in her sapphire eyes, upon which a determined expression appeared on her face. "I've waited 100 years for Big Boss and Lin to return, so I have to persevere even more. I can't let Boss and Lin worry about the heavenly human tribe anymore. I have to defend the Western Front with my life and shoulder some of the burden for Boss." The mermaid flicked her tail lightly, and she sprang up from the colorful bubble. She reached out and rubbed her fair and tender cheek. Then, she purposely became dignified, like a goddess who was ruthless but didn't say much. She had the demeanor of a domineering leader. Only then did she fly to the immortal land above water and gather all the experts for a meeting. Within the massive blue palace, Lan Xiaoni sat on her throne with a cold expression on her face. Her luscious black hair was coiled up in a tall bun, and there was a divine seal flashing on her forehead, exuding a paramount aura that made all of the mighty figures of the West Sea involuntarily revere her. 6 Tao Integration Stage Super Mighty Figures and over 100 Return to Void Stage Mighty Figures were gathered together, and all of them stood respectfully before her. The heavenly human tribe on the Western Front had retreated for the first time, and the West Sea Alliance was finally able to catch a breather. Only the West Sea Alliance would be able to take on the entire heavenly human tribe on their own. In reality, if it weren't for Lan Xiaoni's power of water and her ability to control the ocean, they would have been crushed a long time ago. Not only has the heavenly lightning god returned, but he has also broken through the heavenly human tribe's southern front's southern heavenly gate. "Are you still going to question my decision?" Lan Xiaoni raised her chin with an authoritative expression. As soon as he said this, many of the mighty figures present revealed looks of shame and awkwardness. Back when the news of Lin's death had spread, the West Sea Alliance had been plunged into turmoil. Even though Lan Xiaoni had turned the tide and maintained the stability of the alliance, there were still many mighty figures who were unconvinced. When the heavenly human tribe reappeared, most of the mighty figures and even super mighty figures left the alliance. Just as the West Sea Alliance was on the brink of collapse, Lan Xiaoni awakened the power of the heavenly god of water, and like the ruler of the sea, she once again became the paramount leader of the West Sea Alliance. Even though there were still many mighty figures who were disgruntled during her reign, all of them expressing that they shouldn't be fighting for the human race and for the heavenly lightning god, who was most likely dead. However, Lan Xiaoni always emphasized that Lin would definitely return and lead the human race and the West Sea to a glorious future. High priests Gu Yu and Yu Feiyu, who were the most proficient in divination, had also divined a portion of the future. By following Lin, there was indeed a chance that they could create an unprecedented glorious future. Thus, the West Sea Alliance became the most staunch ally of the human race and defended the Western Front for the human race. This defense lasted for over 50 years. Who knew how they managed to hold on for so long? Thankfully, Lan Xiaoni's prophecy came true. The heavenly lightning god really did return, and he proved to the world in his most powerful form by destroying the entire heavenly human tribe army on the southern front. This was extremely exciting news for the West Sea Alliance. It proved that they had chosen the right person to follow, and all of their previous efforts had been worth it. After this incident, Lan Xiaoni's prestige became even more prominent. All of the mighty figures looked up at the woman on the throne and bowed in unison. "We pledge our loyalty to Alliance Leader Lan." A faint smile appeared on Lan Xiaoni's face, but she didn't say anything. However, her heart was already jumping with joy. Chapter 1598. Lan Xiaoni began to set up the West Sea defensive line and assigned all of the mighty figures to guard important locations. She had awakened the power of water, and one of its abilities was the ability to sense what was happening in an area of 500,000 kilometers around her. It was also because of this ability that the West Sea had become her battlefield. No movement of the heavenly human tribe could escape her detection. Lan Xiaoni's rule had become even more stable now, and none of the mighty figures of the West Sea objected to her orders. Instead, all of them expressed their unwavering determination to carry them out. Lan Xiaoni was not going to let her guard down in the upcoming battle. Instead, she was going to be even more cautious. The extermination team had displayed the true power of the heavenly human tribe to the world. Just the southern heavenly gate alone was guarded by 9 heaven pioneer stage heavenly humans, 2 divine heaven stage heavenly humans, 2 heavenly gods, and 1 paramount heavenly god. If the southern heaven gate was like that, what about their western heaven gate? After all, they had been fighting for 50 years, and the only reason they hadn't been defeated was because their heavenly god-level opponents hadn't come out to fight. It was even more impossible for the western heavenly gate to not have any heavenly gods. From what Lan Xiaoni knew, the paramount heavenly sea god was buried in a certain tomb deep within the West Sea. The Empyrean deities didn't act because they were afraid of the backlash from the heavenly Tao, or because the timing wasn't right. However, she couldn't just ignore the fact that the enemy hadn't appeared yet. She had to prepare for the worst-case scenario. The meeting was dismissed. Lan Xiaoni continued to bask in the sun on her colorful bubble. Her upper body was wearing a small blue shirt, and her white and slender waist was exposed, shining brightly under the sun. Her fishtail was still swaying gently in boredom. She rested her chin on her hand and fell into deep thought. What was the worst-case scenario? Lan Xiaoni's eyes lit up slightly. In the worst-case scenario, I'm already a dead fish. In that case, shouldn't I write a will in advance? Let's do it. She took out a brush, ink, and white paper from her storage ring and stuck out her tongue. Her blue eyes were filled with excitement and shyness as she wrote a few words in the upper left corner. Big Boss and Lin. These words were written almost instinctively. Even she didn't expect that the only person she wanted to write a will to would be him. Lan Xiaoni's hand faltered slightly. She suddenly didn't know how to write. What should she write? A bright blush appeared on Lan Xiaoni's face, and it was as if tears were about to seep out of her eyes. Her 2 tiny pearls swayed lightly beneath her earlobes, just like her thumping heart. Alliance Leader Land's pleasant yet conflicted voice rang out from the immortal land above water. Ah! I'm going to die. Achoo! Lin, who was lying under the warm sun, suddenly sneezed. Yi Ling, who was feeding him fruits, leaned over curiously, and a fragrant aroma wafted into the air as she looked at Lin with a curious expression. Master, did you catch a cold? Perhaps there's a beauty who's thinking of me. Lin chuckled. Yi Ling couldn't help but roll her eyes. Su Xiaolan glanced at Lin. Lin shuddered, and he tried to salvage the situation. Maybe it's not a human who misses me. Cats, dogs, insects, fish, and fish can also miss me. I'm a celebrity now. Su Xiaolan couldn't be bothered to respond to him, and she also rolled her eyes at him before continuing to munch on spirit fruits. Even if there were people who liked Lin these days, she couldn't do anything about it. After all, her Lin was so exceptional, how could she not allow other female cultivators to like him? Lin's fame was on the rise, and he was becoming the husband of the citizens. She, Su Xiaolan, wasn't some kind of demon, so she wasn't going to go against all of the female cultivators who liked her Lin. Su Xiaolan was quite confident that Lin didn't like other female cultivators. She was also very exceptional, and there were many male cultivators who admired her. However, all of them knew that they weren't good enough for her, and none of them dared to dream of being with her. As for other female cultivators, how many of them could compare to her? If they wanted to compete with her for Lin, they had to at least weigh their own abilities. She was the most powerful human cultivator in the world, and she was extremely confident. Rumble, all of a sudden, dark clouds began to gather in the sky. Lin's expression faltered upon seeing this. In contrast, an elated expression appeared on Yi Ling's face. Brother and brother are back. In the sky above, 2 black dragons obscured the entire heaven and earth. Sinister veined patterns appeared on their thick scales, and a paramount dragon might surged through the air. This was the aura of a Tao integration stage true dragon. Lin was still lying on his lounge chair, and a smile appeared on his face as he sensed the terrifying auras. The two black dragons were clearly showing off, and their mentality was very similar to Yi Ling's when she had reunited with him back when they were reunited. They were both disciples who wanted to prove their abilities to their master. They wanted to earn their master's approval. Soon, the dark clouds dissipated. Two dragon tribe men in black Taoist robes appeared above the 4-9 immortal sect. One of them was a young man with dragon horns and golden eyes, while the other was a middle-aged man with dragon horns and crimson eyes. The two of them had vastly different dispositions, and their expressions were also quite different upon seeing Enlin. "Master, you really are still alive." Tears welled up in Xiao Zhe's eyes as he hurriedly made his way over to Enlin. He wanted to hug Enlin, but he was afraid that this would be too abrupt, so he stood hesitantly in front of Enlin. A faint smile appeared on Enlin's face as he spread open his arms. Only then did Xiao Zhe embrace him with excitement. "This is great. Master, I thought you were already dead, but who would have thought that you would still be alive? It's true. You really are alive, Master." The young man hugged Enlin tightly and felt the warmth of Enlin's body as he spoke with excitement. Enlin's lips twitched slightly. Why did the term, alive master, sound so weird? Xiao Tu made his way over to Enlin with a warm smile on his face, and he extended a natural salute. "Your disciple pays his respects to Master. Welcome back, Master." "There's no need to be so polite." Enlin waved a hand. He clicked his tongue in wonder as he looked at Xiao Zhe and Xiao Tuesday. Who would have thought that both of you would reach the Dao integration stage? 2 Dao integration stage true dragons. Just thinking about it makes me feel bad *SS. You're probably the face of our 4-9 immortal sect now. Master, you're the face of our sect. Xiao Tu spoke with reverence on his face. He was truly in awe of his master. In the past, he had been won over by Enlin's mending of the heavens and rapid progression in his cultivation base, but now, he had been won over by Enlin leading the extermination team to wipe out the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army on the southern front. His master was a legendary figure who was capable of such feats, and this was something to be proud of. Xiao Zhe was even more direct. "If I didn't have master's teachings, how would I be where I am today?" Enlin rubbed his nose awkwardly. "What did I teach you?" A scorching light appeared in Xiao Zhe's eyes as he looked at Enlin. "Master, you've proven to me that only with power can I be revered and revered by all. You've taught me by example, and I'm willing to give everything I have to achieve this goal." Enlin's mouth gaped open. That worked? Chapter 1599. Su Xiaolan couldn't help but burst into laughter as she ridiculed him. "Little Xiao, your ability to spout nonsense with a straight face has improved again. What do you mean by using strength to prove it? Only with great strength can you become respected by thousands of people, and only then can you become high and mighty. Isn't this the same as saying that only with strength can you show off?" However, Enlin is indeed teaching by example. At the very least, he has proven through his actions that you can flex if you are powerful. If that's your motivation for Dao integration stage, then that's quite a good goal. The woman in the jade dress looked at the handsome young man with a dainty smile on her face. Enlin felt as if a sword had been stabbed into his heart. His master was flexing to motivate his disciple, so that his disciple could understand the true meaning of life and succeed in Dao integration stage? Even a ghost wouldn't believe such a thing, right? Xiao Zhe looked at Enlin with a serious expression and completely ignored Su Xiaolan's words. "Master, I'm telling the truth. You have to believe me." Enlin's face convulsed. All right, I believe you." Yi Ling latched onto Enlin's arm with a wide grin on her face. "My motivation to become more powerful is also because Master has set a very good example for me. I want to prove to Master that you made the right decision to accept me as your disciple and that I didn't disappoint you." Enlin's heart had been stabbed a few times, but it had been healed by the adorable Yi Ling. I don't have as much sincerity as you do. Xiao Tu heaved a forlorn sigh. I just don't want to die. I just want to live longer. Unlin nodded with approval. That's a very good goal. From a certain perspective, Xiao Tu's motivation to become more powerful was the most reliable one. Not long after that, a beautiful woman with a shimmering golden body made her way over to them. She latched onto Xiao Zhe's arm and bowed with a faint smile on her face. Fanny pays her respects to sect leader Unlin. Unlin's eyes lit up. You too, Fanny and Xiaoza blushed at the same time. Master, I became Dao partners with Fanny 60 years ago. Xiaoza was a little embarrassed as he scratched his head awkwardly. Fanny also wore a shy expression as she stared at Unlin. Unlin was a little dazed. Xiaoza, who was not very good with words, had finally managed to win Fanny's heart. Thinking back in the opposite shore realm, he was the most crucial assisting player. At the time, he didn't have anything to give to his disciple, so he decided to give his disciple a wife. He then made a bet with Fanny, and if he lost, he had to agree to one of her requests. After that, Fanny lost, and he asked Fanny to try to be friends with Xiaoza. Xiaoza successfully won over Fanny with his silver tongue. Who would have thought that after several decades, Xiaoza and Fanny would actually be together, personally facilitating a marriage, and this marriage was a major event in his disciple's life. As a master, this kind of feeling was quite wonderful. Congratulations, congratulations! I wish you two happiness forever. Unlin stood up to congratulate them with an elated smile on his face. Xiaoza and Fanny were also very happy to receive Unlin's blessings. They brought out a jug of immortal wine from their storage rings and poured cups for both Unlin and Su Xiaolan. Master, you weren't present during our wedding, so let us formally offer a toast to you now. Xiaoza raised his cup with tears shimmering in his eyes. Fanny also extended a slender hand and raised a glass of wine with a grateful expression. Zhe's master is the person I respect the most. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have been able to find Zhe and reap the fruits of my happiness. Little and I, Zhe, the two of them looked at one another with deep emotion. Unlin's flesh crawled as he raised his cup again to congratulate the two of them. Oh wait, they weren't really newlyweds. They had been married for several decades, so they could be considered an old married couple. After toasting Unlin, Xiaoza and Fanny made their way over to Su Xiaolan with wide grins on their faces. Let us offer another toast to Master's wife. Xiaoza's eyes lit up. Su Xiaolan also stood up from her lounge chair with a vibrant smile on her face. I wish you two happiness for the rest of your lives. Fanny extended a salute before asking with a hint of anticipation in her eyes, when will we be able to attend Master and Master's wife's wedding? After all, I heard from Zhe that your agreement. The shimmering golden woman raised her eyebrows with a knowing expression. Su Xiaolan naturally knew what she wanted to say, and she didn't say anything for once. Instead, she turned to Unlin with an affectionate smile on her face. I'll listen to Unlin on this, and I'll let Unlin decide. Oh! Fanny let loose a meaningful cry of surprise. Xiaoza, Xiao Tu, and Yi Ling also chimed in. Unlin blushed upon hearing the mention of his wedding with Su Xiaolan, and he glared at them. What are you all yelling about? Even though that was what he was saying, he still wore a smile on his face. Xiaoza chuckled. Who would have thought that Master's wife, who has always been very assertive, would be so gentle and helpless in front of Master, Su Xiaolan's eyebrows perked up slightly as she let out a long sigh. Ah, Master's wife is very gentle and beautiful, just like a goddess. Xiaoza immediately spoke with an extremely sincere expression, and you really respect Master. After all, in your hearts, each other's feelings are the most important. This is also a sign of true love, higher than the heavens and deeper than the ocean. All right, hurry up and withdraw your divine technique. Su Xiaolan rolled her eyes. Xiaoza shut his mouth with a sheepish expression. Enlin was completely dumbstruck. He thought to himself, the divine Tao this disciple has attained is probably diatribe, right? Due to the destruction of the southern heavenly gate, the other 4 heavenly human tribe armies had retreated for over 50,000 kilometers, giving the Kingdom of the 9 States United Army a chance to catch their breath. It was exactly because of this that Xiaoza and Xiao Tu couldn't wait to return to the sect to see Enlin. Soon, everyone else also returned. Xiao Chou and Bai Yao also returned. It was said that time was like a butcher's knife. However, the passage of 100 years didn't leave a single mark on Xiao Chou's face. He was still as ugly as ever, and he was even uglier as he wailed in Enlin's arms. However, Enlin was very touched. In his eyes, Xiao Chou was extremely handsome. Bai Yao extended a curtsy toward Enlin with a faint smile on her face. She was still as seductive as ever, and she was very pleasing to the eye. Bai Muyu also made her way over with a vibrant smile on her extremely beautiful features. I pay my respects to sect leader Enlin. Please take care of me in the future. We're all one family, so there's no need to be so formal. Enlin chuckled. They really were one family now. Ever since the creation realm decided to join the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army, the White Fox Tribe Imperial family had all migrated to the 4-9 Immortal sect. Enlin was naturally more than happy to welcome them. There were many handsome men and beautiful women in the sect now, so why not? After the White Fox Tribe migrated, the 4-9 Immortal sect gained close to 10 return to Void stage mighty figures. Enlin suddenly recalled that Xiao Chou and Bai Yao were both returned to Void initial stage mighty figures. Thinking about it now, it seemed like his beast pets and servants were also returned to Void stage mighty figures. I'm the one with the lowest cultivation base again? Chapter 1600. With this in mind, Enlin was instantly motivated to cultivate again. The challenges in the future were only going to become more and more severe, so he had to find an opportunity to improve his cultivation base. As for the 100-year promise? Enlin had already mentioned that promise to Su Xiaolan when they were reunited. Su Xiaolan had told him to listen to Enlin at any time. Enlin, on the other hand, said that he would only get married after taking care of the heavenly human tribe. He didn't want to host a wedding only to have a bunch of heavenly gods come to ruin the wedding and launch a surprise attack on him. If he was going to hold a wedding, then he had to hold it in a safe, smooth, and joyful manner. This was going to be the best memory of his life, and he couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Hence, his top priority now was to become more powerful, then destroy the heavenly human tribe and the heavenly gods before returning to his sect and marrying Xiaolan. Enlin was even more motivated now that he had set a goal for himself. He turned to look at the cultivation base tab in his system. Return to Void Intermediate Stage, Condition. Beat 9 Dao Integration Stage living beings into submission. Mission Progress, June 9th. You have now beaten Feng Wuya, Emperor Yi Deng, Emperor and Mang, Empress Helen, Emperor Bei Xing, and the God Engulfing Skeleton into submission. Enlin was quite elated. He had thought that this was an impossible mission, but he had already completed most of it. He only had to beat 3 more Dao Integration Stage super mighty figures into submission, and he would be able to progress to the Return to Void Intermediate Stage. He was a little surprised that the God Engulfing Skeleton had been beaten into submission. In terms of power, the God Engulfing Skeleton was at the Dao Integration Pinnacle Stage, and he wouldn't be able to defeat it even if he unleashed his full power. Setting aside the fact that the heavenly gods were more powerful than the God Engulfing Skeleton, Enlin could definitely defeat the God Engulfing Skeleton if he could beat the heavenly god. Enlin was only able to defeat the heavenly gods because his powers of the heavenly gods countered each other, as well as his special constitution and the special properties of the evil-slaying sword. Only with all of these special hacks was he able to defeat a heavenly god in such a perilous situation. In reality, just from the perspective of his control over the powers of the heavenly gods, His cultivation base was quite low, so the power and frequency of his use of his powers were inferior to that of the normal heavenly gods. The same went for the god engulfing skeleton. In a one-on-one battle, he really wouldn't be able to defeat the god engulfing skeleton, let alone beat it into submission. The system had determined that he had been beaten into submission. Could it be that this was because he and Su Xiaolan were in a group battle, and Black Spirit Snake was unleashing a relentless barrage of powerful attacks in the sky? As long as the opponent surrendered, it would be considered as having been beaten into submission? There was nothing wrong with this analysis. Enlin suddenly became restless. He turned his gaze to his two disciples in front of him and revealed a kind smile. Little Xiao, little Tu. Enlin smiled. Xiao Zhe and Xiao Tu's hairs stood on end as they stared at Enlin in bewilderment. Xiaoze, what's wrong, master? Xiao Tu, what is it? Haven't you both progressed to the Dao integration stage not long ago? Let me ask you a question. Who's stronger in a fight? Enlin asked. Xiao Zhe and Xiao Tu looked at each other before shaking their heads. I don't know. I've never sparred with Brother Enlin before. Xiao Zhe shook his head with a resigned expression. Both Xiao Zhe and I are extremely durable. He has invincible defenses, while I have countless lives. We're the most difficult beings to deal with among Dao integration stage super mighty figures. If we were to fight once, we probably wouldn't be able to determine a victor even after 3 days and 3 nights. Xiao Tu analyzed in detail. Xiao Zhe paused for 3 seconds before replying. We probably wouldn't be able to determine who's stronger even after fighting for a year. Enlin, why are you asking this question? Su Xiaolan asked. I want to see who's weaker, then we can join forces to beat him into submission. Enlin replied with a sincere expression. Su Xiaolan, Xiao Zhe and Xiao Tu. Their sect had a Dao integration stage super mighty figure, so they naturally had to make good use of this resource. Seeing as he knew that it was useful to beat his opponents into submission, why should he waste this opportunity? Xiao Zhe and Xiao Tu finally understood why Enlin's benevolent smile gave them goosebumps. He was AF** King retard. I think I'm stronger. Xiao Tu retorted without any hesitation. No, I'm clearly stronger. Xiao Zhe retorted in a cold voice. Enlin, Su Xiaolan. Enlin, they're finally back from the Kingdom of the Nine States, so please don't make things difficult for your disciple. Su Xiaolan was a little sympathetic. Master's wife is the best. Xiao Tu turned to her with a grateful expression. Long live Xiaolan. Xiao Zhe also yelled with excitement. Enlin felt like this made sense, so he gave up on the idea. Not taking into account anything else, but his disciples had fought through life and death, and they were finally home. Were they going to be beaten up by their master and master's wife? That was way too pitiful. Enlin couldn't bear to see this happen. You're right, Xiaolan. Enlin looked at Su Xiaolan with a loving expression. Xiao Zhe and Xiao Tu seemed to have realized something. If they wanted to live a good life, they had to suck up to master's wife. Enlin was well aware of his system's nature. If he wanted to complete the system mission and beat a Dao integration stage super mighty figure into submission, he had to at least severely wound them to the brink of death. Xiao Zhe and Xiao Tu couldn't be bothered with that. If little Huang were to be beaten like that, he might run away from home and lose him forever. As for Xiaolan, Enlin couldn't even bear to punch her, let alone beat her into submission. Just like that, this evil plan was temporarily shelved. Enlin had to think of something else. Enlin took a deep breath. Xiaolan, I have a plan that I might need your help with. Sure, Su Xiaolan replied. Enlin faltered slightly upon hearing this. I haven't told you what the plan is yet. I'm willing to do anything as long as I can help you, Su Xiaolan replied with a smile. Enlin's heart jolted upon hearing this, and a sense of warmth welled up in his heart from being trusted. As for Xiao Zhe, Xiao Chou, and the others, they naturally began to jeer again. They all had Dao partners, but they still felt like they had been showered with dog food. Xiao Tu didn't feel much of a reaction. After all, he had been single for hundreds of thousands of years and had lost interest in female dragons a long time ago. He didn't care much about relationships, and he only felt like Master's wife was a good person. Xiaolan, tell me which Dao integration stage super mighty figure is weak, and we can go bully them together, Anlin suggested. Bully Dao integration stage super mighty figures? What kind of hobby is that? Su Xiaolan was shocked. I have a mission to become more powerful, and I have to beat a Dao integration stage super mighty figure into submission, Anlin replied. Su Xiaolan finally understood what Anlin was trying to do. Xiao Zhe and Xiao Tu were dumbstruck. Beating up Dao integration stage super mighty figures could make them more powerful? All right, I'll gather some information for you. Su Xiaolan nodded with a solemn expression. She knew that Anlin really did want to take advantage of this opportunity to become more powerful while the battle was still relatively easy. As for becoming more powerful through the Dao integration stage, others might not believe it, but Su Xiaolan definitely believed it. A man who could progress through consuming beast cores and divine pills, why couldn't he become more powerful through beating up Dao integration stage super mighty figures? Chapter 1601. Su Xiaolan's support made Anlin very happy. Thus, the two of them began to ponder over who to target. Let's ignore the Dao integration stage super mighty figures that have joined the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army for now. After all, if we provoke them, divine heaven stage powerful beings and heavenly gods could easily be drawn to us, Su Xiaolan analyzed. Anlin nodded in agreement. Then let's start with the super mighty figures that harbor enmity toward the kingdom of the 9 states but haven't joined the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army yet. Su Xiaolan nodded in agreement. Those are all hidden landmines that might jump out at any time to attack the human race. If we can completely eradicate them, then we'll be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. At this moment, a woman in a colorful dress made her way over with a warm and pleasant smile. Master, I just went to the myriad flower forest of the gem state to collect some top-notch nectar. Would you like to try some? Oh, little Gu. Xiao Gu, should I call you Xiao Dai now? Anlin accepted the nectar and looked at the beautiful woman before him with a smile on his face. She was as beautiful as a Jiangnan river beauty. The woman in a colorful dress bowed gracefully, and a gentle smile appeared on her face. You can call me whatever you like, Master. Anlin clicked his tongue in wonder. Since when was little Gu so feminine? Could it be that her disposition had also changed after reaching the pinnacle of the return to void intermediate stage? Little Gu seemed to have sensed Anlin's thoughts, and she explained patiently, I'm cultivating in the Tao of metamorphosis, so I naturally have to be more like a butterfly. Occasionally dressing up as a flower maiden is my hobby, and it's also part of my cultivation. You can do that? Anlin was astonished. Nothing is too strange in this vast world. Little Gu didn't think there was a problem. Her bestie, Xiaohong, was able to attain her divine Tao even while basking in the sun, so it was no problem for her to attain her divine Tao by dressing up as a flower maiden. Su Xiaolan continued with a dainty smile. Nothing is too strange in this vast world, but the most extraordinary of all are the members of the 4-9 Immortal sect. As the acting sect master for decades, she naturally had the right to say such words. Su Xiaolan counted on her slender fingers. There's little Gu, who attempted to attain the divine Tao by transforming into a flower. There's Xiao Hong, who attained the divine Tao by basking in the sun. There's Xiao Tu, who attained the Tao integration stage because he didn't want to die. There's Xian Yuan Qing, who progressed to the return to void stage after accidentally blowing himself up while researching explosions. There's Sun Yulong, who progressed to the return to void stage after being given nightmares by the sword spirit. There's Cassidy and Merlin, who attained the divine Tao for the sake of blood. There's Yi Ling, who progressed to the return to void pinnacle stage while weeping in front of Anlin's grave. There's little Na, who jumped to the return to void pinnacle stage. She counted all of the 9 immortal sect members who had made breakthroughs through various inexplicable methods, and Enlin was completely flabbergasted. If he hadn't heard it, he wouldn't have known, but now that he heard it, they were all freaking weirdos. There were all kinds of strange ways to break through. What was wrong with the members of this sect? Were they collectively letting themselves go? An apologetic expression appeared on her face, as if she was feeling a little guilty for making her breakthroughs too easily, and she was afraid that she would agitate everyone present. Yi Ling pursed her lips with a bright blush on her face. It was already embarrassing enough for her to suddenly make a breakthrough while weeping in front of a grave, but what was even more terrifying was that the person she had been weeping in front of was now standing right in front of her. It was extremely embarrassing. Su Xiaolan turned to Enlin with a meaningful expression as she spoke. Of course, our sect leader's method of making breakthroughs is also the most bizarre. I've never seen our sect leader cultivate seriously before, and he's always doing all kinds of strange things, but his cultivation base just keeps progressing. Everyone burst into raucous laughter upon hearing this, and they felt a lot more at ease. They were all worried that their methods of making breakthroughs were too strange, and they were feeling a little uneasy. However, compared to their sect leader, their methods were completely insignificant. With that in mind, their uneasy hearts finally relaxed a little. Wait. Enlin faltered momentarily before asking, "That's not what we were discussing just then, right?" Su Xiaolan also came to her senses. "That's right, we were discussing how to defeat Dao integration stage super mighty figures." Enlin and Su Xiaolan tasted the nectar that little Gu had brought them. The nectar was extremely fragrant and sweet, and not only did it gently tickle their taste buds, it also spread throughout their entire bodies, making them feel as if they were being melted by a sweet aroma, making them feel extremely comfortable. "Delicious!" Su Xiaolan praised. "More!" Enlin was also very excited as he ate. Little Gu wore a warm smile as she produced 2 more cups of nectar before placing them in front of Enlin and Su Xiaolan. The two of them continued to discuss their original problem as they ate the nectar. "Let's not think about the dark marshlands for now. I've already beaten Yi Deng into submission, and Emperor Fu Tian is at the Dao integration pinnacle stage, so he won't be easy to deal with," Enlin said. "Let's try to stay close to our enemies. If we're too far away from the Kingdom of the 9 States, we might be surrounded or intercepted by other enemies," Su Xiaolan continued. A few first-rate powers flashed through Enlin's mind, and he nodded lightly. "Then let's not think about the western heavenly dragon forest and the creation realm for now." Su Xiaolan stroked her chin as she murmured to herself, "In that case, the best places to go are the sinister spirit beast cesspool, the opposite shore realm, and the void spirit realm." Enlin smiled upon detecting the peculiar expression on Su Xiaolan's face. "Su Xiaolan, when I become more powerful, I'll go to the void spirit realm with you again. Next time, neither of them will be able to escape." "All right." Su Xiaolan looked at Enlin with a loving expression. Their next choices were the sinister spirit beast cesspool and the opposite shore realm. Enlin turned his eyes toward Fanny and little Gu. One of them was the daughter of the pill sage of the ghost tribe, while the other was a return to void stage immortal beast from the sinister spirit beast cesspool. They knew more about that place than Enlin and Xiaolan did. Fanny analyzed, "The opposite shore realm's attitude toward the Kingdom of the 9 States is very ambiguous. Some of them support the human race, some advocate for the extermination of the human race, and some remain neutral." Enlin knew that Fanny's father was a Dao integration stage supermighty figure, but he remained neutral. Among the Dao integration stage super-mighty figures who advocate for the extermination of the human race are Ghost Emperor Pajun and the Dark Spirit King. Ghost Emperor Pajun is at the Dao integration intermediate stage and has already joined the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army on the Northern Front. The Dark Spirit King is at the Tao integration initial stage, and he's at a critical juncture in his cultivation of the dark earthly energy, so he hasn't joined the Northern United Army yet, Fanny explained. The Jade Bone Immortal Butterfly also chimed in. The sinister spirit beast cesspool is a staunch anti-human faction. All 4 mythological beasts have joined the Heavenly Human Tribe United Army, but only the Tao Integration Initial Stage Primordial Demonic Bear and the Tao Integration Intermediate Stage Thousand Change Divine Monkey have actually joined the army. As for the Tao Integration Initial Stage Divine Bat Emperor and the Tao Integration Pinnacle Stage Heavenly Venerate Yu Qiong, they're both staying in the sinister spirit beast cesspool. I wonder what they're preparing. Anlin and Su Xiaolan looked at each other to see the excitement in each other's eyes. Should we start with the Tao Integration Initial Stage Super Mighty Figures? Su Xiaolan asked. A cruel smile appeared on Anlin's face. Alright. The Dark Spirit King and the Divine Bat Emperor. Your good days are over. Chapter 1602. Anlin and Su Xiaolan decided to start by beating the Dark Spirit King and the Divine Bat Emperor into submission. This operation required speed, accuracy, and ruthlessness, so it was not suitable for a large-scale operation. Xiao Tu and Xiao Zhe were the main forces on the eastern front of the Kingdom of the Nine States, and they had to guard the eastern front as well, so they couldn't leave for now. As for Phoenix Little Huang, it had to take Su Xiaolan's place to guard the northern front. The northern front was still too weak compared to the other fronts. Even with the Snow Maiden's Great Empress and the High Priestess, it was still a little lacking without Su Xiaolan and the Phoenix. Hence, it was better to leave Little Huang to guard the northern front for now. After a brief discussion, Anlin and Su Xiaolan decided to bring Little Na, who was just barely comparable to a Tao Integration Stage super mighty figure. The 3 of them would be able to defeat a Tao Integration Initial Stage super mighty figure with ease. They rested for another 3 days, and after recovering from their injuries and energy, they marched into the Opposite Shore Realm again. The Opposite Shore Realm was a paradise for the dead. It was located in the northwestern region of the Kingdom of the Nine States, and it was comparable to the Kingdom of the Nine States in size. Due to the special laws of heaven and earth, the Opposite Shore Realm was shrouded in eternal darkness and extremely rich in energy, making it the ideal place to cultivate in the Ghost Tao. It was exactly because of this that there were many evil cultivators there. Anlin, Su Xiaolan, and Tina traveled through space. Tao Integration Stage super mighty figures will be able to sense each other as their Tao resonates with heaven and earth. Hence, I have to teach you a special concealment spell technique that can conceal the aura of your Tao. Anlin explained with a smile. Su Xiaolan was astonished. There's a spell technique like that? Of course. Why do you think Chen Chen and the others were able to avoid detection during the extermination team's operation? Even the heavenly gods couldn't detect them, and it was all thanks to that spell technique. A white light shimmered on Anlin's fingertip as he nodded towards Su Xiaolan's glabella. Don't refuse. I'll teach you the true intent of the spell technique. It's very easy to master. Su Xiaolan did as she was told and closed her eyes to feel the boundless Tao art true meaning. After a short moment, she opened her eyes, and her eyes were filled with a bright color. What an exquisite spell technique! He's simply blazing a new trail and forming a system of his own. Su Xiaolan sighed and said, the illusory body art can conceal the aura of the Tao, and can even avoid the detection of the heavenly Tao. Anlin nodded with a smile. When Chen Chen and I were searching for an exit in the River of Time, we used this spell technique to evade the heavenly time god's power. So many Tao Integration Stage super mighty figures were unable to solve this problem, yet the Heaven Crushing Sect was able to solve it. It has to be said that the Heaven Crushing Sect really is something. It's more than that. Su Xiaolan rolled her eyes at Anlin. Also, don't talk to me like an old man. Anlin laughed heartily. He felt like it was quite interesting to flaunt his seniority in front of Xiaolan. Wow! A power that can isolate Dao? I want to learn it too, I want to learn it too! Tina's emerald eyes lit up as she tugged on Enlin's hair with excitement. Enlin was a little surprised. This little fairy was capable of inventing countless spell techniques that defied the natural order a long time ago, but she was also interested in the spell techniques of the heaven-crushing sect? However, seeing as this was Tina's request, he naturally wasn't going to turn her down. He immediately poked the fairy's head with a thick finger and transmitted the true intent of the spell technique to Tina. Tina's eyes shimmered with excitement as she observed the illusory body art. Oh, so that's how it is. It really is very easy to conceal. If the will of the heavens doesn't try to detect it, it really won't be able to detect it. A white light flashed through the fairy's eyes, and countless laws suddenly appeared and disappeared before reverting to their original state. All right, I've deciphered it. The living beings in the divine mirror world won't be able to deceive me anymore. Tina clapped her hands together with a dainty smile. Done. Enlin, Su Xiaolan. So the reason why she was so eager to learn this spell technique was to decipher it? Tina's badassery had once again refreshed Enlin's impression of her. Little Na, how's your divine mirror world doing? Enlin couldn't help but ask. It's still the same. Tina sighed lightly. Even though there are over 20 extremely powerful living beings who have already attained the power of the divine Tao, they feel like they're missing something if they want to progress to the Tao integration stage. Enlin came to a sudden realization. This meant that the divine mirror world was facing some kind of bottleneck again. In order to break through this bottleneck, it most likely required not only accumulation, but also opportunities and opportunities. Last time, the divine mirror world had been upgraded by the realm core. What did the divine mirror world need to evolve now? Enlin couldn't think of anything, and neither could the goddess of creation. They could only take things one step at a time. The three of them soon arrived at the border of the opposite shore realm. Enlin, Tina, and Su Xiaolan all tore through space to appear in this world. There were special laws of heaven and earth that prevented them from traveling through space here. Enlin and the others flew deeper into the opposite shore realm. Su Xiaolan was a Tao integration stage super mighty figure, and she unleashed her void body mantra spell technique to conceal her aura before following Enlin onto the black brick. The sky became inky black and gusts of sinister winds swept past, sending chills running down one's spine. The ground here wasn't completely barren, and there were all types of glowing plants, most of which were red and purple in color, giving them a lethal sense of beauty. Su Xiaolan. The Dark Spirit King resides in Tianming City in the northern part of the opposite shore realm, and it rules over billions of undead soldiers in the northern part of the opposite shore realm. It is the undisputed monarch of the Ghost tribe. It is renowned across the entire continent, and all living beings tremble in fear at the mere mention of its name, and even children weep at the mere mention of its name. All right, stop trying to create a terrifying persona for the enemy. It's just a Tao integration initial stage super mighty figure. Enlin chuckled. Su Xiaolan turned to Enlin with a speechless expression. Don't underestimate all Tao integration stage super mighty figures. They are all extremely talented beings who have been acknowledged by the great Tao of heaven and earth and possess limitless potential. Their trump cards are also quite powerful, and it is possible for them to challenge opponents of a higher rank. Enlin naturally wasn't going to underestimate any of his enemies. After all, many of the enemies he had slain had died because they had underestimated him. With such an example in front of him, he naturally wasn't going to make the same mistake. After that, Su Xiaolan continued to brag about the Dark Spirit King. She said that the dark energy was the most powerful being in the world, and that even the emperors of the celestial court were extremely wary of it. She was most likely trying to get Enlin to take it seriously. Enlin could hear the concern in her voice, and a smile appeared on his face as he listened intently. The three of them continued onward into the opposite shore realm. Their cultivation bases were extremely powerful, and there was nothing that could stop them in their tracks. Thus, they flew for over 5 million kilometers. At a very peculiar place, he stopped in his tracks. There were vibrant rainbow flowers blooming on the ground, swaying their seductive bodies.